Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this meeting of the Council. Please note that the meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. I welcome members of the press and public who may be viewing this meeting remotely. We now move on to the formal business of the meeting. Can we take the notice convening the meeting as read? Do we have any apologies of absence?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have apologies from councillors J. Heron, M. Heron, Maudie, Potts, Samuels, Spedding, P. Walker, J. Warne and Watson. And Councillor Johnston may be late for the meeting but is hoping to attend, Madam Mayor.
Are there any further apologies? Councillor Ty?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's not an apology, it's an apology for lateness. Joanne Lavichy actually is just on the roundabout. There's some unforeseen roadworks we're stuck in, which shall be with us very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Martin Haswell's running late but is hoping to attend.
Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the annual meeting of the Council held on the 17th of May 2023. Can we agree the minutes? Do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Rowntree?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Declare interest, item 6, motion 3, due to Siglian.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Madam Mayor, it's the same for me. Notice of motion and Siglian.
Councillor Walton?
I declare an interest regarding item 12, petitions. I live in a street that regards one of the petitions.
Thank you. I'd like to thank those members who have given notice of their wish to speak. Where notice has been given, the member will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. If any member who hasn't given prior notice wishes to speak at any point during the meeting, they should please raise their hand to indicate and speak when invited to do so. It would also be of assistance if they could state their name. Now, I understand that the Council has received an award. Councillor Checker, do you have something to present to the Council?
I do, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I would like to be joined by Councillor Paul Stewart, and we're going to do a little double act as we tell you about this award. So I'll begin and let you know that this award represents the maintaining excellence level of the region's Better Health at Work award. Several factors have changed the Council's workplace landscape in the past year, adapting our working post-COVID-19, the construction of the new Parsons Depot, and the opening of City Hall, to name just 3. Yet the Council directly employs over 2,600 people in many different workplaces, from our award-winning building here at City Hall to the port and home and community-based working. It is safe to say our workplaces are diverse. As such, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach to employee engagement, meeting well-being needs, and our living a vision of happy, health and safe workplace.
And following on from Councillor Checker, Madam Mayor, this award recognises the efforts and achievements of the Council in being receptive to the evolving change and adaptations needed as we take great strides forward to our continuous journey to deliver a strong health and well-being offer to our diverse employee demographic. We are obviously absolutely delighted that through the considered effort of the cross-departmental collaboration, Sunderland City Council has continued to sustain the top level of the Better Health at Work award, which is maintaining excellence, Madam Mayor. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, thank you. We're proud to present this award and certificate confirming such a fantastic achievement.
Thank you. I'd just like to make one announcement for myself. You may have noticed I'm wearing a T-shirt tonight. Not my normal attire. But this T-shirt was given to me by Alex from the Gunners Club after we'd laid a wreath on Saturday at the Cenotaph with a challenge. And the challenge was, if I wear this T-shirt all through this meeting tonight, Alex and the Gunners will give me £500 for my charity. So thank you, Alex. That concludes my announcements. I believe we're moving on now to outstanding motions from the last ordinary meeting of the Council. First one is a notice of motion, School Streets. I invite Councillor Reid to read and move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This council recognises the horrendous parking problems that can arise around schools at the start and end of the teaching day, and expresses its support for a school streets approach which would limit access to the streets in which schools are located to residents and emergency vehicles at such time. I'd move the motion.
Councillor Dixon, would you like to second the motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second the motion and speak directly after Councillor Reid, please. Thank you.
Councillor Reid, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd first like to start by saying that's a fantastic T-shirt you're wearing. I think this was a long-standing campaign by now retired Councillor Peter Wood, and I think it's unfortunate that he didn't have the chance to speak on this himself. That being said, I would like to thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing us to speak on this tonight because of unusual constitutional circumstances, we'll say. I would repeat the remarks I made in the budget meeting some weeks ago, which is that it's to give credit where credit is due that the Council is and has trialled the School Street scheme in Washington. It is simply to speed up the process we're in at the minute, which is to roll it out across the city as options for schools and streets and councillors and communities to tackle what in many cases is dangerous and at the very least an annoyance for residents, which is school time parking congestion and the like. For those who are unaware, the School Street scheme is the limiting of traffic into a street for a very specific period of time, where only certain vehicles are allowed in for residents, emergency service vehicles, or indeed if there are parents of children who have disabilities who need to be dropped up closer to the school. The hope in many cases, and the reality in cases where it's been implemented in London and Newcastle, I know, is that school time parking is limited, is dealt with. Residents are able to park on their drives, because a problem that occurs at the minute is that cars and parents park in front of people's drives, and in some cases in my own ward, many residents have faced some horrendous abuse when they've attempted to move people on from their drives simply to get into their own driveways. So it's a solution to that, or it's at least a very first step. The proposal, or the trial that we did in Washington was very labour intensive. It required a lot of council staff to be there. The alternative, a variation, is that you could have number plate recognition cameras. That would mean that you would free up parking warden staff who are there on site to other schools that are probably not appropriate for it, on main roads and the like. And it was a relatively minor cost for an enormous problem for so many residents in my ward in particular, but across the city. Thornhill Park and Meadowside are issues that message me daily. I had a text from a resident this morning saying that she wants to lend her name to support the motion. I said, that's very nice, but that's not possible, unfortunately. But I think it shows the widespread problem that is prevalent in my ward. So that's why I think this motion, whilst not binding to anything specific, anything arbitrary, it simply opens up the options for councillors and communities to be able to take actions into their own hands and solve a problem that is rather persistent. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First of all, I would like to say how much I enjoyed being part of your guests at the Mayor's Civic Service last Sunday at Holy Trinity at High Osworth. I'd like to wish you all the very best for the year ahead. This motion, which I'm happy to second, covers such an important subject that impacts on countless people, includes so many diverse issues that are relevant to the discussion. And here's just a few examples. It will help promote and create better community cohesion, avoiding potentially dangerous incidents between residents and those parking outside houses, sometimes blocking driveways, and the distress for children to see adults verbally arguing. It has been said that generally mild-mannered people can assume a different personality when it comes to parking near schools. It will reduce pollution in localities with young children in such close proximity, with a massive reduction in the number of cars that at times includes drivers who inexplicably leave their car engines running. And essentially, it will improve safety. It was on Meadowside, the street where St Mary's Catholic Primary School is located, where there was a narrow escape from a very nasty accident when a pupil was run over by a passing car that was mercifully driving very slowly. And it was a result of that incident that the head teacher and ourselves asked for a meeting with council officers and the police, resulting in the school expressing great interest in the council's School Street scheme. On Thornhill Park, there is Argyle House School, and I've been informed also that there was a narrow miss when a turning van nearly crushing a pupil as the driver did a three-point turn. And again, a local homeowner told me of one example where access for an ambulance was impossible to the residential care home for the elderly because of parked cars, and that a stretcher had to be taken up the road to collect the person who required attention. So as Councillor Reid has indicated, this motion is an attempt to further promote the scheme, which has been trialled, and to encourage the Council to continue to expand it. Since early last year, when this pilot in Washington was announced, we have taken on board the issues surrounding the implementation of school streets and spoken to many people. We've worked with the Council when we joined the highway officers at an inconsiderate parking event outside St Mary's School around 8 a.m. one morning to see for ourselves, and also have joined council officers in Thornhill Park, as well, of course, as our own visits as we all live nearby. And no doubt councillors in their own wards will have done something similar. Clearly, the location of many schools will not lend themselves to this school streets, and of course, there will have to be extensive consultation for each specific proposal. But this has been successfully implemented elsewhere in the country, and we would encourage the Council to do the same. As Councillor Reid has observed, our intention here is to further promote the School Street scheme using our examples to emphasise to the portfolio holder and senior officers that in our experience there is much interest for more advanced discussions. The Council contains many officers who have vast expertise in creating and successfully implementing community parking management schemes, two of which I've been involved with myself. These are, of course, different, but in saying that, the principle has similarities, and Sunderland Council should be well placed with this past officer experience to take the School Street scheme further. The Council have made a good start, but with it being over a year since the pilot in Washington began, it was our opinion that the time was right for this motion to be brought to the wider forum of a full council meeting. If from the outset we want to involve our residents throughout the city in decision-making discussions, then this motion is a reflection of that, because there's surely not an issue that it is of greater significance to us all, whether the public or elected members, than protecting the safety of our school children. To conclude, Madam Mayor, we have initiated a non-political, non-partisan debate here, kept what we had to say short and to the point, and I cannot think of any reason why members working closely together with council officers in their own wards would be unable to support our motion. Thank you.
I understand that Councillor William wishes to move an amendment.
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. Okay, so the amendment I would propose is, if we just look at what's on the page, after approach delete, we would add which would and add as an option, so that the new motion reads with an additional paragraph. The Council recognises the horrendous parking problems that can arise around schools at the start and end of the teaching day and expresses its support for a school streets approach as an option that would limit access to the streets in which schools are located to residents and emergency vehicles at such times. This Council therefore welcomes the recent pilot initiative introduced to assess the feasibility of such school streets as part of Sunderland Labour's manifesto commitment to residents of the city. This Council therefore requests that once the learning derived from the pilot scheme is assessed, that a report be presented to Cabinet on parking options around schools, inclusive of future school street schemes where they are supported by local residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Who wishes to second the amendment?
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the amendment.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We all recognise schools are busy places, and depending on the number of children attending and the geography, different issues arise. Ideally, all children would walk to school, and many do, but we must be realistic. Some families don't have a school within walking distance. Faith schools, often by their admissions arrangements, attract from a wider area, i.e. that diocesan area, and children need to be driven in. Many parents have limited time to drop their children and get to work and don't actually have the luxury of going back home to get the car. Secondary schools do pose a wider issue with a larger geographic area covered and poor public transport in many areas. The pilot started in 2022 at St Bede's in Washington. Actually, when you look at it, it's a pretty straightforward area, schools at the bottom of a cul-de-sac, and signage and restrictions are in place around that school. It will be evaluated in 18 months, as we've already said, and a report brought forward. We've already put lots of 20-mile-an-hour zones in around many of our schools. It's also interesting to note that on the briefing note, when I looked at it, it was talking about the majority of schools put forward were in Washington. So, you've mentioned St Mary's. I'd be really keen to hear which other ones you're keen to go forward. We've got to recognise each site's unique, each solution is different. We don't want parking to be pushed further away from the school onto other streets, which is sometimes what happens. So what can we do in the meantime? I think we need to remind parents of their responsibilities. There are parents who park on yellow lines, park dangerously, double park, drive through bus links, personal issue with me, and block drives. When confronted, they're often aggressive instead of apologising for their behaviour. I have been out with the parking teams and I'm mortified at some of the abuse these staff get from members of the public who the officer will say, excuse me, do you know that's a double yellow line? You shouldn't be parking there. You shouldn't be parking here. And people are just downright rude. Parents who are in this situation need to realise they're putting their own children at risk, as well as their children's friends. Again, I'm aware of some near misses in the schools around Washington, where I live, and it is unacceptable. Can you imagine how you'd feel if you had an accident and potentially hurt your child's friend? Not good. So, if this is you as a parent, let it sink in and change your behaviour. Some primaries often have a flexible entry time on a morning. It extends the disruption period, but it does lessen the volume of traffic as it's staggered. Is that worth a discussion with your school? Absolutely take that it's more difficult on an evening because there is an exit time when all children tend to come out. We're all about making things better for our residents, but we don't want to impose a one-size-fits-all. We do need that consultation, but in the meantime, parents really do need to take that responsibility of driving their children to school seriously. Be aware and show care. Madam Mayor, I recommend the amendment to colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No.
I understand that councillors Hartnack, Peacock, Dunn and Fagan wish to speak on the motion. So do you wish to speak on the amendment?
Madam Mayor, no need for me to speak on this amendment. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to speak on the amendment, please. Thank you.
Councillor Fagan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was just to keep it quite brief, really. I think a lot of it's already been covered. We will be voting for the amended motion on this school streets. I do think something does need to be done around a lot of the schools, and this is a starting point, but I would like to just emphasise that residents really must be consulted, businesses. I know there was a point about the care home where they couldn't get to a care home. I know of schools that are on the same street as a care home, so that would, you know, and would need to be taken into account, where there may be doctor surgeries, things like that as well. How would that work? So it must be looked at on a case-by-case basis. It's a shame that the amendment has been politicised a little bit with the Labour manifesto in there. But you know, if it works, it works. I suppose if that kind of helps to support the motion, I suppose. And Linda, I was just wondering, you're saying your personal problem with the bus lane. Is it you who keeps driving through the bus lanes, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's everything from me. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, through you, I understand, I think some of the members did wish to speak on the amendment. So if I could just clarify that the names I have of speakers on the amendment, Councillor Fagan has spoken, and we have councillors Dunn, Hartnack and Peacock. Is that right? And Councillor Mullen would like to speak. Any other speaker? I think it's just Councillor Mullen to add to the list then, Madam Mayor. Councillor Stewart on the amendment. Councillor Truman. So just to clarify once more, Madam Mayor, the speakers are councillors Dunn, Hartnack, Peacock, Mullen, Stewart and H. Truman.
Councillor Dunn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking today to fully support the school streets motion, so I believe it's the only way to tackle the parking problems at the start and the end of the school day, which seems to be a citywide problem. Over the course of the 2 years of being a councillor for the Barnes ward, I've been inundated with emails and phone calls from concerned families and residents around this issue. Families and residents live in the neighbourhood of Richard Avenue School, Barnes Primary Junior School, have reported the following problems like cars being parked on residents' driveways, cars being parked on yellow zigzag lines outside of schools, cars being parked at the corners restricting families' visibility when crossing the road with their children, cars speeding around the school during the drop-off and the pick-up times. I also visit the schools during these morning and afternoon pick-ups to witness myself the problems, and the only way I could describe what I saw on those visits was absolute carnage. I spent some time with civil enforcement officers on these visits, which, by the way, they do a fantastic job under really challenging circumstances, and their presence did deter quite a lot of the issues that were coming up. However, they can't be present all of the time. The schools themselves have done everything they can do to resolve the issue by distributing leaflets, which message the parents and carers that they need to be mindful of where to park to minimise disruption to local residents. The schools themselves have also agreed to participate in the Walkwise and the Well Living Streets Child Pedestrian Programme, and also part of their curriculum they will do street work as well with the young people. But it's clear to me we need a longer term solution for this problem, which I believe the School Streets scheme could deliver on. The benefits introduced in the school streets would encourage active travel, increase the amount of exercise children are getting, improve physical and mental health, improve safety, improve air quality. I've been looking how the scheme's actually worked in London, for example, and it's actually shown that it's reduced air pollution by 23%, and it has an 81% approval rate as well. However, for their scheme to be successful, it's needed to be enforced by the use of automatic number plate reinforcement cameras, which wasn't done for the most recent pilot in Washington and for those neighbouring Newcastle. The feedback, for example, for one of the schools in Newcastle, this is from one resident, they said on the actual school streets, As a resident on this street, there is an immediate improvement. It's quieter, the air seems less polluted, children cross the road safely. I haven't seen any crazy traffic jams, road rage, a common event before the induction to the scheme. I do, however, see cars flaunting the rules. Some of them are repeatedly doing this, and therefore I feel need some enforcement in place. This was just one example, with many others on the same website echoing the same comments. If we do move forward today in supporting the School Street scheme, we need to fully support it with the appropriate resources needed to ensure success. And to conclude, Madam Mayor, I believe we need to be bold in tackling this issue before we have another serious accident on our hands, and the School Street approach is the only way I believe in doing this. I hope colleagues in the room today can support this motion and take the first important step in protecting our residents, parents and carers, but most importantly, our children in the city. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hartnock.
I did indicate, Madam Mayor, that I probably didn't need to speak, but I will just add support while I'm here. I will add support to the amendment on the basis that I think there does need to be a bespoke approach made to each and every school. There are 3 primary schools in my ward. Each of them have all got separate needs in relation to issues associated with parking. But I do endorse the fact that something does need to be done around schools on that bespoke basis, and it's something that does need to be progressed quite quickly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In my ward of St Anne's, we have 3 fantastic primary schools: Christ College, formerly known as Grindon Hall, South Hilton Primary Academy, and of course St Anne's Roman Catholic Primary School, as well as the excellent Academy 360. My own children have attended Christ College for the past 13 years, and I've seen over this time how traffic has increased locally and the effect this has around schools. I've observed personally parents arriving up to 45 minutes early to get a space to drop off or pick up their children as close to the school gates as possible. In some cases, actually across the school gates and obstructing the traffic flow. I've seen arguments with neighbours around the school about parking across driveways or adjacent to living room windows, which has an effect on the neighbours' mental health and well-being and privacy. I've witnessed school crossing patrol officers almost run down by moving vehicles whilst carrying out their duties, and heard reports of assaults upon them from drivers. I've seen accidents ranging from minor bumps to cars leaving the highway completely, and even one vehicle on its roof less than 30 metres from the school gate. Madam Mayor, it's a miracle there's not been a fatality outside one of our schools so far. With children milling around so close to fast vehicles, parents standing in groups chatting and pedestrians trying to get past, a split second is all it will take to step out into the road close to one of these parked vehicles, and a passing driver wouldn't stand a chance of stopping. But this is not the only health risk posed by inconsiderate parents parking so close to the school entrances, Madam Mayor. In the colder months particularly, cars are left running to keep the occupants warm, and in some situations this can greatly affect the air quality that our children and parents are breathing as they approach the school and wait at the gates. I'm aware there's currently a study being carried out in Coventry by one of my Conservative colleagues, which suggests that air quality can be reduced by 2/3 in this situation. Is this really the healthy environment we as a council want our children to be exposed to? So what can we do about this? How do we solve these escalating problems? The truth is there isn't a single solution. The traffic outside of South Hilton Primary is not the same as the traffic outside of St Anne's due to the nature of the streets around the school. However, what this motion is proposing is that we take some action. The council must recognise the worsening parking issues around our city schools and the danger this poses. We must begin to empower our officers to implement parking restrictions, carry out enforcement of penalties, and where possible, limit access during peak times. The council must work with schools to develop healthy and safe options. Walking buses, staggered arrival, departure times, planters to create obstacles to parking, and even pedestrianised zones are all options we should be considering. All of these options will come under the umbrella of the School Streets approach and need not be limited, but indeed should lead to further suggestions from stakeholders. Will parents be happy with this motion? Well, those that park inconsiderately certainly won't. But can anyone in this chamber sit here and imagine the emotion of hearing there's been a child injured, or worse, outside of a school because we didn't act? Put yourself in the place of the child's parent, put yourself in the place of the school crossing patrol officer that witnesses the accident, and put yourself in the place of the driver who didn't see the child until it was too late. Madam Mayor, if we as a council do not choose to support this motion and the amendment tonight, our inaction will inevitably put us in that position. I would much rather support a motion that upsets a few drivers than read about an incident that could so easily be avoided. I will support the motion and the amendment, and I hope every councillor here tonight will put their party politics aside for once and support it too. Thank you.
We only have 3 more speakers on this motion, and as we have a lot of business to go through tonight, could I ask, unless anyone's got anything different to add, because I think everything has been said, I believe, can we just move on? Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It gives me some great pleasure to speak on this amendment to this motion. And the point that I wanted to specifically raise is the fact that, and I'll show you the document here, I think we're all familiar with it, which is the Labour Party's manifesto from last year. And it's really pleasing to see that the opposition groups on this council are now endorsing one of our pledges within our manifesto. And it's good to see that when we can work together and that they are catching up to us with regards to the promises that we've made to the residents of this city. But when looking at the original motion, I think we all clearly have sympathy with it. But I think, sadly, the original motion read as if it was a one-size-fits-all approach to resolving parkings around our local schools. I think solving parking around schools is not that simple, Madam Mayor. School streets can work in certain circumstances, and we've made reference to the pilot that has been taking place in Washington, a pilot instigated by the Labour group in this city. And the results of that pilot will determine really the forthgoing strategy moving forward. But it's important to reference that school streets is just one option to try and resolve this. I mean, other things that schools have done are, for example, the schools themselves trying to take control themselves through their school entrances and patrolling the streets. We have other examples of where we've been introducing new schools and building new schools, that we're putting turning points within school grounds to ensure that there's no car parking problems. And we've also, Madam Mayor, another approach is that with regard to the Council's road safety team organising visits as part of a citywide inconsiderate parking campaign, a successful programme that commenced actually through the Washington Area Committee. Indeed, other schools have been even more proactive in working with parents and neighbouring businesses to find alternatives to parking near the school. Education and behaviour change should all be our first option, Madam Mayor. So as part of our amendment, we're talking about bringing a report back to Cabinet, and that Cabinet should be informed by that pilot. And then really it's a case of we need to accept that each school is unique. I've got one line to finish.
It's just to clarify a point, Councillor Stewart.
What?
Is that okay? Just to clarify, the report back to Cabinet, did Councillor Williams say it's going to be 18 months before we'll get that report?
What is he saying?
The report back. Is it going to be 18 months till we get that report?
I don't think it'll be 18 months, but I think it will need to wait until the pilot is completed.
Could we have an estimation on that time?
Oh, finish your speech.
Right, okay. Can I continue then?
And if I could second to that, how long ago was it the Pallion pilot was carried out, please, Councillor Stewart?
No.
What's he saying?
He's not. Councillor Peacock, that's inappropriate. You're interrupting a speech to just...
Councillor Peacock, can you please sit down and let Councillor
Madam
Stewart
Mayor,
finish?
I was just trying to clarify
If you just sit down and let Councillor Stewart finish first. Thank you.
Carry on, Paul.
Okay, well, I was just going to finish off by saying each school is unique and the solution will be unique to its circumstances. And the amended motion acknowledges that, but it also acknowledges that the status quo is not an option. And I'll just finish off by saying thank you very much for supporting a Labour Party pledge. Thank you.
Here, here.
Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thankfully, most of the 18 months has passed after that. It had a slightly anaesthetising effect, I have to admit. I was happy not to speak, but since Councillor Stewart did, I will say what I wanted to say, which is 18 months is a long time to wait, given the problems that we have in Barnes, and I hadn't planned to speak on this at the last meeting either, but got an email this morning from a resident complaining about the issues that we have at Barnes Infants and Junior School, where if you think you've got chaos in your wards, come and look at what we have in Barnes. Residents literally pulling onto the pavement, all four wheels, and driving down the footpath. Where we've got build-outs to allow people to cross, they have literally pulled in, frontways on and parked in the pavement, blocked people's garages, they have blocked in the bin wagon while it's been trying to collect bins. And 18 months doesn't seem good enough. So on behalf of the Barnes councillors, because I know the three of us are united on this, we would quite happily become a trial area much sooner in order to get this more quickly than 18 months' time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Truman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I first read this notice of motion, and after hearing Councillor Dixon and Councillor Stewart, that a lot of the elements myself, my wife, my neighbours have suffered for many years. When we bought our house, we knew that it had been built on educational land, which was sold by the Education Department many years ago, Penshire Primary. Now, there's 31 houses in our street, and we have the element of, at the junction, we have a nursing home. Coming into the street, we have a hammerhead. The road that goes up between the junction and the care home is so narrow, it's not constituted as a dual carriageway. It doesn't have white lines up the middle, and I have actually witnessed 2 children being hit by cars. Fortunately, both children weren't seriously hurt, and the last one, a couple of months back, actually jumped out of the car on the roadside and ran in to a parked vehicle that was waiting to get past. She suffered quite a heavy bump. Grandmother was with her. I stopped my car, went to speak to the driver, said he needed to report it to the police, and the child needed to go to hospital. Grandmother insisted the child went home with her. Not a lot we could do. I don't think the original notice of motion goes far enough. And I think what Paul Stewart was actually saying was, we need an in-depth look of this, and we need the amendment to be accepted so we can do something which will really work. We've suffered this for years. You know, a lot of us here have been on council quite a number of years, and we've witnessed the actions of the mums and dads at the school doors and the school gates. They would love to park in the classroom. My neighbour got up one morning to a 4x4 being parked on his lawn. And he loved his lawn. He really worked at it. And this guy had parked a BMW 4x4 on the lawn and took the kids into school. I then discovered the BMW lived 3 streets away. Now, he didn't go to work because the car was, I followed it one morning, might think that's a bit dangerous, but when I followed it, he went home. And the guy didn't work, he works from home. So I think we should be supporting the amendment simply because it gives us an opportunity to really look at individual cases, because the notice of motion will not solve every instance outside our schools. And we need to get something concrete to save our children and to educate parents of what the dangers are that they're putting their children in. And obviously the concerns it gives to the residents. So I would urge everyone to support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Reid, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
I do, Madam Mayor. I think it's disappointing that politics has been brought into this, but so long as we get somewhere, with it, that's something. What we have now is an end goal. It will be brought before Cabinet, but we're still in the exact same situation with no timetable, bar some disagreement on the Labour benches about 18 months or 18 minutes. There's a point to make here, which is that the School Street scheme is incredibly flexible in its approach. We didn't advocate it for every school, and it did have certain things that could change depending on school to school. And I accept that that is something that we need to do in full consultation with residents in the community. So this motion recognises it. We recognise that School Street parking is a problem. For any good that motions passed in this chamber actually do anything. And I'd like to end on a quick point, which is I think it's quite incredible that Councillor Stewart would mention that we should take more time and be slow, says a man who is renowned for dithering and delaying when speaking.
Can we take a vote on the amendment? Do we need a show of hands, or are we going to the vote? Show of hands. Thank you. Right. Sorry, I've got to lean over here. The substantive motion reads, this council recognises the horrendous parking problems that can arise around schools at the start and end of the teaching day, and expresses its support for a school streets approach as an option that would limit access to the streets in which schools are located to residents and emergency vehicles at such times. The council therefore welcomes the recent pilot initiative introduced to assess the feasibility of such school streets as part of Sunderland Labour's manifesto commitments to residents of the city. The council therefore requests that once the learning derived from the pilot scheme is assessed, that a report be presented to Cabinet on parking options around schools, inclusive of a programme of future school street schemes, where they are supported by local residents. Does any member wish to comment further on the substantive motion? Is a substantive motion agreed? Thank you. We will now deal with the notice of motion on the North East devolution deal. I invite Councillor Haswell to read and move the motion.
A point of order, Madam Mayor. As Martin hasn't arrived yet, can I move the motion in his stead?
Certainly.
I'm just reading the motion, am I, at this stage? Or? Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This council believes that any future directly elected mayor and North East combined authority should be headquartered in Sunderland.
Councillor Morrissey, would you like to second the motion?
Would it be all right if I second the motion? He's not
Could be.
Yeah, I'll second the motion, thank you.
Councillor Edwards, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. Liberal Democrats share local people's apprehensions about the devolution deal paying for and being governed by a new politician. We still believe the issue should have been put to a referendum on the same day as this year's local elections to gain legitimacy for the project. And if people across the Weir side are going to benefit so much from this deal, and the Conservative government and Labour council bosses should have had nothing to fear by putting it to the vote. As it is, we're going to be landed with a Metro Mayor governing Sunderland that only 300 people or so said they wanted in the recent consultation. And I do think that consultation was a little bit of a sham because you couldn't really say whether or not you wanted the mayor or the project. A lot of people do have legitimate concerns about this. It's the feeling that Newcastle has been prioritised for funding and investment in the past, and that is coming up on the doorstep. You know, people still talk about the metro that Sunderland paid for years, but we only got the service years after. We're still putting up with a second-rate service, and obviously Washington and Houghton don't have any services at all. So I think there is a genuine fear that this deal could be at risk of being dominated by Tyneside again. So we're just trying to be helpful and bring forward this notion to gently nudge the Labour group into doing the right thing and drawing a faint line in the sand that actually we're going to make sure Sunderland is at front and centre of this devolution deal. And I think sending a signal that Sunderland expects and wants the HQ of the new Mayor's office to be here would provide some comfort that we're not going to be forgotten about. Thank you.
Councillor Fagan, do you wish to speak?
No, I don't wish to speak any further. Thank you.
I understand that Councillor Mullen wishes to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm surprised that the Liberals haven't amended this to say that they want the office
Madam
to be
Mayor,
on Villette Road in particular.
Sorry.
Apologies for interrupting. Could we see if there are any other speakers before Councillor Mullen?
I'll
makes
do
his
another
speech?
joke after.
Sorry, Councillor Mullen.
So,
any other speakers?
So, Leader. Thank you. So, Madam Mayor, just Councillor Mullen and the Leader, and then there's a right of reply to Councillor Edgeworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Slightly surprising they haven't proposed putting it on Cannon Cocken Street. The Conservative group will support this. I don't think it'll mean a great deal by doing so. I'm keen to point out that the North East Conservatives did propose a couple of years back that we would move the full office of Police and Crime Commissioner to this site if our candidate had been elected. I understand part of the Police and Crime Commissioner is now here, but not in full. And I'm sure that colleagues in the Conservative Party will lobby our candidate for this once he's announced, but at present we are still drawing up the long list of people for us to reject and block from standing for engaging in cultural activities.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very, very quickly, once we have candidates, because we still don't have agreed candidates, I will be speaking to the Labour candidate, whoever that is, to stress the need for the headquarters of the North East Mayoral Combined Authority to be in Sunderland. And I will also make that point to the other candidates as well, should they, though it is unlikely, I think people accept, should they win. Because it's important, as Councillor Mullen has already pointed out, we have the Police and Crime Commissioner's office now in this building. They're in here for a trial period to see if it works for them. But the Chief Executive and I have worked for 2 years to get the Police and Crime Commissioner to understand that whilst they're based north of the Tyne, much like Councillor Edgeworth's point, the perception is everything's north of the Tyne. So we have them here now. I know this comes up later in the meeting through a question. And we will always try and get the levers of power, be it the police, be it the Mayoral Combined Authority, be it the local authority, be it bringing the House of Lords here when they close it down. Remember that?
The elected Senate, he did confirm it was Stoke.
Us or Stoke.
I'm still waiting.
And well, that's the current government for you. They're a bit chaotic, Councillor O'Brien, I think you'll agree. So we agree the principle of your notice of motion, but ultimately it will come down to whoever wins that election, and they will determine where their office is. And I cannot make anybody, nor can anybody else, Councillor Edgeworth. But we will try. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Edgeworth, do you...
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Well, if only every debate was that quick and simple. Thanks for support. And just to say, all the best people wear T-shirts to full council meetings.
Can we vote on the motion? Agreed. Thank you. Was it something I said?
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Hello.
Sorry. Sorry.
Hello. Point of order, Madam Mayor. I've noticed that a number of Liberal Democrat councillors have arrived today and left very quickly, some of them within 5 minutes of arriving at the meeting. Do we feel that's appropriate, and will they be getting their mark for attendance? Because it doesn't seem that that would be appropriate, Madam Mayor.
Could we take that outside of this meeting, please?
Yes, of course, Madam Mayor. It does sound like you're going to fight me there. So, yes, Madam Mayor, thank you.
We'll now deal with the notice of motion in respect of the lease over the site of the Seaburn Inn. I invite Councillor Mullen to read and move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the following motion. In 2021, Siglian Developments LLP granted a lease over the site of the Seaburn Inn to In Collection Seaburn Limited for a term of 999 years. The premium paid by In Collection Seaburn Limited was £1,000. The duty under Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 to obtain best value only applies to local authorities, meaning Siglian is only required to meet a minimum land receipt requirement which formed part of the option agreement made between the Council and Siglian in 2014. Council, therefore, expresses regret that a prime parcel of land formerly owned by the Council was disposed of for £1,000, takes note of the relationships between the Council and the private sector organisations involved in disposing of the land, and resolves to commission independent review of all disposals made under the 2014 option agreement where the sum paid for a freehold or long lease interest in land was less than £100,000. Terms of reference will include the extent to which the assumptions made by valuers instructed by the Council were realistic and whether sufficient efforts were made to obtain best value.
Councillor Hartnack, would you like to second the motion?
I second the motion, Madam Mayor, and ask to speak immediately after Councillor Mullen.
Councillor Mullen, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. For some time, this council has been subjected to allegations of corruption, of dodgy land deals and of illegality. And I want to begin by situating this motion within that landscape because it relates to the disposal of land, and some people may choose to interpret my speech as part of this wider context, in spite of anything that I actually say. This motion is not an allegation of corruption towards the council, nor of impropriety towards any individual. It is, however, an example of a land deal which is ethically unacceptable and professionally ambiguous. Equally, none of us in the Conservative group question that we want to see progress across the city in respect of new development. But the question before us with this motion is, are we willing to cross ethical lines to achieve that? And if we are, how far beyond those lines are we willing to go? Siglian was a development partner established between Sunderland Council, Igloo and Carillion, and it remained that way until the council took full control of Siglian after the collapse of the latter partner. The option agreement by which Siglian was allowed to draw down parcels of land, formerly under direct council ownership, included a minimum land receipt requirement. In effect, this affords flexibility when disposing of land for development of otherwise commercially unviable projects, where land value prevents a positive outturn, provided the difference is made up by the disposal of other parcels of land within the portfolio. The issue at the heart of this motion is the fact that Siglian disposed of a prime piece of publicly owned land on the seafront, now the site of the Seaburn Inn Hotel, for a comically small sum of money. And it's the view of my group that this was not sensible to treat this land as if commercially unviable. This piece of land is prominent within the Seaburn area, and the site in question extends to well over an acre. Land in the immediate vicinity of it, to draw comparison, has been developed for both housing and leisure, and that land generated capital receipts of millions of pounds. Yet the site of the Seaburn Inn was granted a 999-year lease for a building with a shelf life nowhere near that, for a premium of £1,000. So just to summarise what I'm saying for colleagues, Siglian, an arm's-length body of the council, disposed of public land that might reasonably have been expected to generate capital receipts in the millions for £1,000. We might ask why this decision didn't trigger Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972, requiring the consent of the Secretary of State if there's a large enough discrepancy between price achieved and market value as advised by a chartered surveyor. And the reason the 72 Act doesn't apply in this case is because the arm's length nature of Siglian means that it exists as an entity independent of the council and therefore independent of the best value duty that applies to local authorities. This is a clever but underhand way of getting around the need to demonstrate best value. But what we have to consider is that this was a conscious choice. Somebody in this council made that decision, and the questions that arise from that conscious choice are who made it and in whose interest did they act. For the following sections of my speech, I'm indebted to James Doyle for the work he did as a councillor investigating this and for helping me to write the following parts. Despite the best value not applying, James found that the council did obtain a red book valuation from a chartered surveyor, and Councillor Hartnack will talk about that in more depth. But what is notable at this point is that the valuation of this prime parcel of land advised by that surveyor was nil. In other words, after estimating gross development value, deducting build cost, allowing for developer profit, contingency and financial costs, the residual sum was negative. Surely this would come as a surprise to homeowners and business owners in Seaburn and beyond that an area of land on the seafront like this, with high house prices and high commercial rents, was sold for less than the price of a second-hand car. It seems that the cause of this nil outturn were the assumptions that the surveyor was told by this council to make when preparing their report. Namely, the surveyor was told by the council to assume that the highest and best use of the site was a hotel configured almost exactly as the one that has now been built. This is strikingly unusual, since it's common practice to allow surveyors to exercise their professional judgment when advising as to the most profitable use, taking into account prevailing planning policy and neighbourhood land uses. Council officers responded to James Doyle by saying that the assumptions that were made were informed by public consultation and reflected a public preference for leisure-led schemes over housing. And no doubt members of the Cabinet will attempt to make this debate in defending themselves against this motion. But what has not been adequately answered, and what council officers cannot explain, is why this specific configuration of hotel was chosen at the valuation stage. An outsider could very easily reach the conclusion that these assumptions were chosen not because they represented the site's highest and best use, but
Councillor
instead...
Mullen.
I'm in the final bit. But instead because they represented the scheme that had been proposed by a preferred developer. And such a conclusion would, obviously, carry very serious implications for the council. Madam Mayor, whilst Sunderland's MPs are using their opportunities to ask questions of the Prime Minister in Parliament about the Tees Valley, I hope that here I've provided them with material that they can take up about issues closer to home. But just in case they don't do that, I advise colleagues that the Conservative group has already referred this matter and all of the available evidence to both the Secretary of State for Local Government and to the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, so that they can consider questions which the council officers have thus far said they can't answer because of our 3-month email retention policy.
Councillor Hartnack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The public have a right to expect of their council openness, transparency and honesty at all times, whilst appreciating that some aspects of council business is both complex and at times commercially sensitive. I am, however, sick and tired of hearing allegations in the public domain of Sunderland Council being corrupt. I therefore wish to speak to the element of this motion which highlights the relationships that exist between this council and third parties. Councillor Mullen has referred to the fact that a prime parcel of land on the seafront at Seaburn, which is in excess of 1 acre in size and which is comparable to parcels of land that have been sold for millions of pounds, had nil value according to a surveyor commissioned by Sunderland Council through Bradley Hall. That surveyor was an employee of Bradley Hall, and I don't wish to make comments upon individuals working for Bradley Hall or to question their business practices. What I do want to highlight is the following. Firstly, that the council chose to appoint Bradley Hall despite a well-documented relationship between Bradley Hall and the Inn Collection Group. This relationship was widely known and well documented within industry publications. For Bradley Hall to act on behalf of both the council selling the land and on behalf of the business buying the land is highly questionable. Some might recognise such an arrangement as a conflict of interest. This is, of course, within Bradley Hall's right. They're a private commercial business. They're entitled to as many clients as they want, and professional standards enable them to undertake work for 2 clients in situations like this if information management procedures are properly in place. They could choose to manage conflicts of interest internally in a way that they see fit. But the question we must ask is not of Bradley Hall, but of Siglian and this council. Why did we appoint Bradley Hall, knowing conflict of interests could arise? Why create that potential conflict in the first place? The answers provided to former councillor James Doyle while undertaking wholly reasonable questions of this council through a process of scrutiny were extremely weak by council officers. The council's official line is that the 3-month email retention policy means there is no record of what due diligence was done on the council's part in respect of the appointing of Bradley Hall to act for the council. This is simply not good enough. In fact, it's pathetic and fails to bear scrutiny. We must also note the relationship between Bradley Hall and senior members of staff within this council. And I hereby request that, I know the Chief Executive isn't here, but I request that the Chief Executive of the council commissions an independent and formal investigation into this matter. Secondly, though, we must ask why Bradley Hall arrived at the valuation it did. And the answer to this is that the surveyor was told to assume that the land would be used for a hotel of the exact size and nature of the one that has been built. But this was not inevitable. Why not assume a 50-bed hotel, perhaps larger rooms? Why not 60 beds? Why not have the bar and restaurant area laid out more efficiently in order to provide additional covers? Indeed, why not assume that the site would be used for housing or for other leisure opportunities? The nil valuation was provided because, in essence, the surveyor was boxed into giving it by the very people selling the land. It stinks. In light of what Councillor Mullen and I have said about this very serious and unethical matter, where value for money has been deprioritised, we as Conservatives feel it appropriate to undertake a review of all land disposals made under the 2014 option agreement for under £100,000. And this should capture most, though perhaps not all, transactions where the figure achieved does not seem to marry with the common sense view of best value. It's deeply regretful that this council and Siglian felt it appropriate to sell off this land for a mere £1,000. It is time for Labour to admit fault and acknowledge that a gross error of judgment, and perhaps worse, has taken place. I hope that colleagues will reflect upon the climate in which we conduct this debate. This is a council frequently accused of dodgy land deals and corruption, and I question the extent to which we have learnt lessons from the council's own Wilkin Chapman report. And this motion asks, Madam Mayor, us to let the cleansing light of transparency illuminate how this council has chosen to dispose of prime, publicly owned land. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Are there any amendments? I understand that Councillors Dixon and McDonagh want to speak on the motion. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion?
Councillor Stewart. So, Madam Mayor, the speakers are Councillors Dixon, McDonagh, Stewart, and there is a right of reply to Councillor Mullen.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I shall be quite brief. I used to actually work under the auspices of the RICS as a valuer and surveyor, though I must confess I've never valued a hotel for £1,000 before. I'll really stick to two sort of technical issues which interest me as having sort of gone down this route over many years. I would really like to know how Bradley Hall were chosen and were other firms who do similar sort of work invited to tender for this work, and what was the basis on which Bradley Hall were selected? Was it they were cheaper? Was it a cheaper quote for this detailed sort of work? Was their presentation more impressive than the others? So the names of the other firms who were invited to do this work would be, I think, of great interest in the public domain. When we used to value properties, premises, sometimes we were asked to give hypothetical situations whereby, subject to planning permission for this, planning permission for that. And I think one of the most important things that we need to know from the Bradley Hall report was, did they provide a figure that was different to nil? In other words, were they also instructed to give a valuation on the basis of housing or any other use that would have taken the valuation and the value much, much higher than nil? I'm slightly uncomfortable with the Siglian situation in relation to the duty of Section 123 of the Local Government Act to provide best value only applying to local authorities, when in 2019 Siglian was effectively taken over by the local authority, and Siglian's address is these premises. So that slightly worries me as well. And I'm just wondering, is there anything in it for the council for the future? Is there any sell-on clause, rent-on clause? Is there anything written down that might give some value to the people of Sunderland? My colleagues have gone into great detail and will continue to do so. I'm pleased that they're going to ask the RICS to have a look at this. I'm not casting aspersions on Bradley Hall at all. I'm looking at the instructions they were given. Thank you.
Councillor McDonough.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to give you a very warm welcome to your first full council. I'm sure you'll be absolutely marvellous as always. Of course, I'm disappointed that my bid to become mayor fell short last time, but perhaps we could have some sort of arrangement. You know, you could be the day mayor, I could be the night mayor. Maybe we could do it like that, but we shall see. So, Madam Mayor, I'm very concerned and saddened to be standing here today, quite frankly, as this deal either smacks of incompetence or something more sinister, we don't know. As a council, we must be above and beyond reproach, but we must also be seen to be above and beyond reproach, and this deal does not meet the high standards by which we must conduct ourselves at the council on the face of it. The development in Seaburn, whilst welcomed, seems to have been part of a botched land deal, which can only be seen as a financial disaster for the taxpayer of this city. The council purchased the land for over £1.3 million, with the land then released to a developer for a mere £1,000. This is not a small financial loss. This is a loss in the millions, at a time when the benches opposite are constantly bemoaning their lack of resources. It's yet another example of money not being too tight, but being spectacularly badly managed. Was this incompetence, or was something else at play here? Well, I don't know personally, but we must urgently find out. And the only way we can do this is through a truly independent review. The public must expect better from this council, and we need to know what has gone wrong. A financial black hole of such spectacular proportions simply cannot be ignored, and the public trust must be maintained. I can already hear the chatter from residents about this issue, and many are deeply concerned and are bringing their own conclusions. An independent investigation would help to put a stop to this and inspire trust. An independent review into this situation is not just advisable, it's essential if the public are going to have any trust in this council and in future land deals. If the council have nothing to hide, then they have nothing to fear. I've been on this council for 4 years now, and I like to think that I get on well and respect everyone here today, regardless of political allegiance. We're all here to do good, to make the city better, and to work for those who have elected us. This is not a political argument. This is about trust and the scrutiny of major deals within our city, and this one that has some major questions surrounding it. Have mistakes been made? What can we do better in the future? These questions must be answered, and I hope that the Labour Group will step up to the mark and agree to this motion to ensure that trust is maintained with the people of this city. The alternative is the loss of public trust in possibly one of the worst scandals that this council may have seen in its history. We need answers, and I'm sure that the leader and the rest of the front bench are confident that the council will emerge with a clean bill of health from any review. The leader, I'm sure, will be so confident that he will pledge today that if any independent review does find any wrongdoing, then he will resign his position when the review is concluded. In conclusion, Madam Mayor, I urge every person in this chamber today to vote for this motion. It is incredibly important. We need to maintain the trust with the public. We need to be transparent, and we cannot be seen to have anything to hide. If we do not support this, then any councillor who votes against the motion will be unable to look their residents in the eye, as residents will simply think that we have something to hide, and that would not be good enough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response, I really am quite shocked at some of the language that has been referenced here about dirty land deals, corruption, sinister. Clearly, we're all a bunch of gangsters.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Here. Madam Mayor.
I don't think anybody has mentioned issues associated with corruption. They have not mentioned issues of corruption. They have mentioned dirty land deals, and they have, because that's what the public perceive is taking place. But nobody has been accused in this chamber of corruption. Madam Mayor, thank you.
We can all watch it later on YouTube, Madam Mayor. Okay. In 2014, following a competitive procurement process, Siglian was established, and Siglian Developments LLP Devco was granted an option over the whole of the Seaburn site for a minimum land price of £1 million, plus the council overall on any subsequent development profit released by Devco across the full site. This minimum land price was set through a competitive process and reflected the council's leisure-led mixed-use development objectives for Seaburn. External valuation advice was obtained by the council in 2014 to confirm that the total consideration payable by Siglian to the council for each development site under the 2014 option agreement represented the best consideration reasonably obtainable in accordance with section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972. In 2019, the Devco board subsequently agreed to the disposal of a long leasehold interest in the Seaburn Hotel site for a premium of £1,000 that has been referenced. The agreed premium was supported by external advice provided to Devco by Frank Knight, that it confirmed that the open market value for the hotel site was nominal only given the proposed hotel use. Therefore, the transaction represented the reasonable open market terms at that time. Separately, in 2020, and prior to the transfer of the hotel site to Devco, the council obtained its own independent valuation advice on the hotel from Bradley Hall Limited, which have been mentioned, and they are an RICS qualified valuer, which confirmed a residual land value of a negative £1.5 million for the proposed development site. It is also noteworthy that prior to the disposal, Siglian completed extensive public consultation on the proposed master plan for the Seaburn regeneration. The development of the hotel reflects the desire of the local community, the local members, to create a high-quality leisure-led development as part of a transformation of the seafront rather than residential development that could have been potentially generated a higher land value but was not the subject of the public and member objection. In 2020, DevCo paid the council the £1 million land price specified in the option agreement for the entire Seaburn site. The Seaburn Inn was successfully delivered by Inn Collection Seaburn Limited and is an extremely successful addition to the city's leisure offer and has been an integral part of the social and economic regeneration of the seafront. The Seaburn Inn has generated 6.9 million of private sector investment and an annual rateable value of £119,000 and is attracting 105,000 annual visitors with 19,000 overnight stays. That is significantly increasing the expenditure in the local daytime and nighttime economy. The Seaburn Inn has created 84 full-time jobs, 250 indirect jobs in the supply chain and 60 construction jobs, providing much valued career opportunities for Sunderland people. The Council continues to work proactively with private sector organisations to optimise the utilisation of its land assets, to maximise investment and development and to drive social and economic regeneration across this city. As the Council's wholly owned investment and development company, Siglian has successfully unlocked 1,200 high-quality sustainable new homes in Potters Hill, Seaburn, Riverside, Sunderland and Sunnyside, 450,000 square feet of modern employment space on the former Volk site, and a 42-bed hotel and 42,000 square feet of vibrant leisure space at Seaburn, and delivered critical infrastructure that has unlocked a further £400 million of private sector investment in that area. In delivering this transformational regeneration and in keeping with the terms of the option agreement, Siglian will deliver a minimum of £8 million in land receipts.
Councillor Stewart.
Sorry. I've got 5 minutes left, Madam Mayor.
No. No.
I've got 4 lines left. No, mind. Can I be very quick? I'll be very quick and wind up. And in reference to the fact that, I'll just finish off by the fact that Siglian will deliver a minimum of 8 million in land receipts. And importantly, Madam Mayor, it provides an annual dividend to this council of £1 million a year. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Mullen, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given the seriousness of what was accused, that defence was feeble. The Cabinet Secretary has not been able to answer some of the core questions that are brought up. Why can council officers not provide an audit trail to evidence some of the things that I have said? Why have they blamed it on the council's 3-month email retention policy? And he said that the valuation was nominal given the site proposed. We know that, we'd already found that out, but the question that we had, which he completely glazed over, was who specified to the surveyor that the hotel would be exactly as it has been built. As Councillor Hartnack said, the surveyor could have been asked to assume a number of different things about the use for the site, but they were handed a pre-prepared vision of what the hotel was going to be, and then from that arises separate questions which I brought up in my original speech, which he didn't answer. This, fortunately, is a political debate, and I can see from the look on decent Labour colleagues' faces that when I was talking, when Councillor Hartnack was talking, they weren't comfortable with the things that were coming out. But if this wasn't a political debate, if this was a planning inspectorate or an ombudsman, and you came out with that, that wouldn't be good enough, and you know it wouldn't be good enough, because council officers have made decisions that cannot be accounted for, and they have said that themselves. So the question still arises. The point he made at the end about Siglian and its contribution is what I'd already covered in terms of the wider portfolio. It is allowed to make a loss on land that is commercially unviable in order that it then balances out by making a profit elsewhere. But an acre of land on the seafront at Seaburn is not unviable. Parcels of land next to it sold for millions. These questions are important. They can be answered by having the independent review, but you haven't answered them tonight, Paul.
Yeah.
Can we take a vote on the motion? Are we doing electronic vote?
So, Madam Mayor, if the officer could confirm, please, when the system's ready to take the vote. So, members, if you would like to vote now on the motion.
Sorry, we've got a defective voting station here.
Just coming on now, maybe. Sorry, I couldn't hear you that. Is it-
Sorry, the voting station's not working.
Ah, right. If you could hold on a second, please. It may be that it needs a new battery in, so we'll try that. Right, thank you. I think the system is working now, so if members could exercise their vote, please. And the vote will be closing in a moment. And if the officer could now close the vote, please, and display the results. So there are 23 votes in favour of the motion, no abstentions, 34 votes against, and therefore the motion is defeated.
The next item, sorry, I'll just wait till the next item is the reception of petitions. Do any members have any petitions to present?
Madam Mayor, we've already received notice from Councillors Hartnack and Councillor Dunn. Councillor Ty, Councillor Wood. Councillor Walton. So, Madam Mayor, that's Councillors Hartnack, Dunn, Ty, Wood and Walton.
Councillor Hartnack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been asked tonight on behalf of 95 Southwick residents, would you believe, who've determined that they lack trust in their Southwick councillors to present this petition on their behalf. It's about opposition from residents regarding the planning proposal to change the halfway house into a house of multiple occupation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a petition opposing the planning permission for the house and multiple occupancy application for 24 Humbledon Park. And it reads as follows: we, the undersigned, being a resident at Humbledon Park, oppose the planning permission being granted at the HMO at 24 Humbledon Park, Sunderland, on the grounds of its impact upon the character of the area, parking, road safety matters, and the potential to attract antisocial behaviour to the area, and that's signed by 16 residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ty.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I've got a petition from 45 residents requesting that Sunderland City Council urgently carry out road resurfacing of unacceptable sections of Hartley Drive and Dibden Gardens.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a petition on behalf of Save the National Grass Centre, 29,181 signatories. The undersigned call on Sunderland Council, the University of Sunderland and regional national bodies to do all in their power to retain the National Grass Centre at the St Peter's location. The signatories believe it is one of the few nationally important buildings in the city that draws visitors from across the region and beyond. It is vital to the vibrancy of the city and adds significantly to the lives of the local people, businesses, students and the area. Keeping alive the 1,300-year-old tradition of glassmaking is vital to the city's heritage, culture and identity. We understand, or the signatories understand, the cost of maintaining such an iconic and nationally important building may be too high for the university to bear alone and urge alternative arrangements to be found to safeguard the National Grass Centre and the future of the Northern Gallery for Contemporary Art. Can I also say, as a little slip in, there is a public meeting about this at St Peter's, 22nd at 7 p.m. for all of those watching avidly on the internet. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to present the following petition. We, the undersigned, call on Sunderland City Council to include Alston Crescent on its list of priority gritting routes.
Can we agree to refer these to the appropriate officer? The next item is questions from the public. I'll now read out the question we have received. Louise Green, a resident of Sunderland, has submitted the following question. With the agreement of a new Aldi store being on the site at Colliery Lane, Hetton, are there any traffic measures going to be put in place? Can I ask who is... Sorry, Councillor Johnson, I didn't see you come in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I sneaked in, sorry for being late. Yes, thank you, Louise Green, for the question, and just to reassure, the introduction of traffic measures will be considered as part of the ongoing planning process yet to be determined, and an update will be provided to the resident in due course. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We now move on to questions from members of the Council. Question 1 is free 5G internet provision from Councillor Blackburn, and Councillor Stewart will reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, could the leader inform Council when we will see free 5G internet provision being rolled out to public buildings and places in Sunderland, Washington and the coalfields? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn, for prior notice of the question. Madam Mayor, the Labour Party made a promise in its manifesto. That one there? Okay. Actually, on page 29, for those who are interested, to deliver free high-speed Wi-Fi to all of our public buildings and spaces by 2026. And I'm pleased to provide an update showing progress on this manifesto pledge. Just to remind everybody, the free public Wi-Fi in Sunderland is certified by Friendly Wi-Fi, the safe certification standard for public Wi-Fi. And it's now available as part of the city centre, the riverside, the seafront, and the park in Roker. We also have large public free Wi-Fi zoned within the City Hall. In addition, the museum and Winter Gardens and the libraries in Washington and the Coalfield also have free access to Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is currently being installed in the Riverside Car Park, Thompson's Road Park, and will shortly be extended to cover the train station redevelopment. Most recently, it has been included in the free Wi-Fi within the calf and seating area within the new Ellamore Park in Hetton. The Council has committed to advanced connectivity being introduced in all developments ongoing, such as the pedestrian footbridge and Culture House. Funding bids have also been submitted to further deploy free superfast public Wi-Fi to 24 community buildings across the city that include many within Washington and the Coalfield areas. The announcement in relation to those community hubs that have been successful, those letters will be going out to those tomorrow, so we'll find out quite quickly in relation to who has been successful. But I can confirm that all areas of the city will benefit. Further funding bids are being progressed wherever possible, including a bid submitted to include a next generation connectivity within the football club and the esports arena. I'll just conclude by saying this council will continue to expand areas covering free Wi-Fi to ensure that our manifesto pledge, as I've referenced, will be kept. This is important for us here in the Labour Party that Labour keeps its promises. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The next question is PFI Palace, and that's Councillor Margaret Crosby and Councillor Paul Stewart to reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the leader tell us if the new office of the Police and Crime Commissioner opening in the City Hall, or the PFI Palace as some of my colleagues call it, will benefit the coffers of the City Council by bringing in a market rate rental income? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Crosby for prior notice of the question. In relation to the question and the coffers of the council, my understanding of the definition of that is that it's a large chest that contains valuables. I have instructed the lead finance officer of the council to see if we can find said chest within City Hall, and once I have an answer on that, I will reply back to Councillor Crosby with regards to actually what's in it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Catering for meetings, and that's Councillor Michael Hartnock and Councillor Paul Stewart will reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the Leader of the Council justify the hundreds of pounds a year revealed through a recent Freedom of Information request that the Council spends on providing catering for meetings, including the joint meeting of the Cabinet and Chief Officers, many of whom are on salaries of over £100,000?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and can I thank Councillor Hartnock for prior notice of the question. A recent FOI request asked for information regarding the cost of catering at council committee meetings and joint meetings of the Cabinet and Chief Officers. The response advised that during 2022-23, just over £1,330 was spent on refreshments for meetings of the Appeals Panel, Health and Wellbeing Board and the Joint Leadership Team. This accounts for 0.0005% of the revenue budget, Madam Mayor. In response to Councillor Hartnock's question, the particular meetings concerned can be lengthy, and in the case of the Appeals Committee in particular, may deal with complex and sensitive matters, and from a personal experience, note that they can last for many hours at a time. Attendees at the Joint Leadership Team and Health and Wellbeing Board include senior members and officers, as well as partners who may have had little time between meetings to obtain refreshments. Indeed, in the case of the Health and Wellbeing Board, the meetings take place over lunchtime, with some of the board members being external health professionals, including GPs, who attend the meetings between other commitments. Considering his fellow Conservative colleagues who currently or previously sat on some of these committees, clearly been slurping the odd cup of tea and gobbling down the odd cheese sandwich, perhaps he should direct the question at them. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Supplementary, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hartnock.
I didn't ask for a justification around the 0.000% of the budget. I think it's the principal, Paul, that we're actually talking about. But on Thursday, the 23rd of March this year, I was inadvertently invited to a joint leadership team meeting by an officer of the council. Obviously a mistake. It was in the Mayor's parlour. And present there were cabinet members, directors and executive directors. Didn't see any visitors. I know Councillor Williams and Fiona Miller were quite shocked to see me turn up there. But scoffing amongst a rather lavish buffet were all attendees. This isn't one sandwich, this is a lavish buffet. Bearing in mind directors and executive directors are on a significant salary in addition to market premium supplements of between £12,000 and £18,000 a year, is this extravagance and greed simply another example of treating the public of Sunderland with contempt? Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Stewart.
I think in reply to that, I think as somebody particularly who sat on the appeals panel, the food has not been lavish by any means. And I think what you're suggesting certainly I think is something that I would reject. I think at the end of the day, we're talking about a small number of meetings that can last a significant amount of time, often over lunchtime, and involve external partners. And I think what we're talking about there, £1,330, is entirely reasonable, considering those circumstances. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Manifesto pledges, and that'll be Councillor Michael Walker, and Councillor Rowntree will reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the leader inform the Council how many residents have benefited from Labour delivering on its manifesto pledges to introduce free bulky waste removal, free pest control and free bins if stolen? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Walker for his question. Free replacement bins for those lost, stolen or damaged were introduced on the 1st of April 2022. During 2022 and 23, the Council issued 12,912 bins up until the end of March. From the 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of May 23, the Council has issued 1,858 free bins. Free bulky waste collections were introduced on the 1st of April 23. From the date until the 31st of May 23, the Council has taken bookings for 9,317 free bulky waste collections. Since the removal of fees on the 1st of October 2021, the Pest Control team has carried out 16,024 pest control treatment visits to residential premises across the city. And I think it'll be remiss, Madam Mayor, if I don't concur with my colleague, Councillor Stewart, about how quickly we're delivering on our manifesto pledges. Thank you.
Sewage dumping. Councillor Malcolm Bond and Councillor Miller will reply.
First, thank you, Mayor. The motion passed by Council on the 12th of November 2022 asked the Chief Executive to write to Northumbria Water Limited to urge them to reduce sewage outflows locally and commission an independent survey of the sewerage system in Sunderland. Can the leader please inform of the dates and details of letters sent and replies received?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Bond for prior knowledge of the question. Following the motion to Council, the Chief Executive wrote to the following agencies during January of 2023, raising concerns with regards to sewerage outflows across Sunderland. So we wrote to Theresa Coffey MP, Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Miss Heidi Mottram, Chief Executive of Northumbria Water Limited, and Sir James Bevan, the Chief Executive of the Environment Agency. The Council subsequently received responses from DEFRA on May 2023 and the Environment Agency in March of 2023. Both organisations acknowledged the Council's concern and confirmed that water companies would be required to set out an action plan based on the following. By 2035, water companies will have to improve all storm overflows discharging into or near every designated bathing water site and improve 75% of overflows discharging to high priority nature sites. And by 2050, this will apply to all remaining storm overflows covered by DEFRA targets regardless of location. The Council welcomes these action plans and will continue to support regulating bodies and raise concerns with Northumbria Water as appropriate on behalf of our residents. As of today, we have still not heard from Theresa Coffey, but does that really surprise anyone? Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bond.
First, I'd like to thank the council leader and the chief executive for getting in touch with the bodies concerned. Some of the information given is basically just the kicking down the road of the can by the Conservative government, though, and those dates indicate that. I think what it's got to be done, there's two sides to this. There's the government and the water companies and the fat cats in that industry, and there's the public and the environment. And I think it's most important that the council take the side of the general public and our own environment. And obviously, the local Conservatives, their position's rather confused because they're trying to ride two horses at the same time. But I think we know where our interests lie. Thank you very much.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that, Councillor Bond. I genuinely think, actually, on this item, there is full cross-party agreement. We will do what we can for our residents. Local councillors, where those sites are, will continue to feedback and, in fact, pressure the council, which is entirely appropriate, for us to do what we can regarding our communication then to government through those agencies. And we must continue to do so. I personally think how the water industry and the waste that flows through it from the chief execs down and out needs to be root and branch changed. So we'll continue as a council to do what we can for our residents, and I think everybody here would agree with that, Councillor Bond. Thank you.
Free hospitality at concerts. Councillor McDonough and Councillor Price will reply.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member confirm if any members of the Cabinet, chief officers or other councillors or staff members have accepted free hospitality at concerts held at the Stadium of Light this year, including the recent Beyoncé and Pink concerts? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm grateful to Councillor McGrath for his prior knowledge of this question. Well, we all applaud the fact that the City of Sunderland is now becoming a recognised venue for events. However, as you can imagine, months of planning and decisions take place to secure a superb outcome. Obviously, Sunderland Association Football Club and the concert promoter need to form a tight partnership with others, such as Northumbria Police, Nexus, and of course, Sunderland City Council. They look to us to give them professional advice on the Safety Advisory Group, regulatory services, environmental services, the events team are involved, and of course traffic management and others. They all play essential roles to bring these events to Sunderland. And as such are encouraged by the promoters to view the resulting events and make a professional opinion of what went right and perhaps what went wrong and what can be done better in the future. I can confirm that those who did attend the concert were at no cost whatsoever to Sunderland City Council. Yes, the following councillors' employees attended across the 3 concerts that recently took place at the Stadium of Light. The leader, the Healthy City Deputy Cabinet Member, the Licensing and Regulatory Committee Chair, the Mayor and the Mayor's Consort, Chief Executive, the Executive Director of City Development, the Director of Smart Cities and Enabling Services, the Development Director Residential, the Business Investment Manager, the Smart Cities Programme Manager and the Senior Business Investment Officer. I repeat, concerts at the Stadium of Light are world-class events which provide a unique opportunity for the Council and its partners to showcase Sunderland with a view to driving further economic prosperity for residents and through investment into this city. Attendance at these events provides a key opportunity for elected members and officers to represent the city and its interests, building relationships with key businesses, partners and investors. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Supplementary, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McDonough.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the leader please confirm or deny whether pink tickets allocated to him were passed on to family or friends?
Councillor Miller?
I couldn't attend the Pink concert, so tickets were passed on to other people, Councillor McDonough. Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Consultation with the football club.
Sorry, Councillor Ty.
I wish to make a point of personal explanation too. I was at both of those concerts in my role as a youth worker with Youth Almighty as a volunteer. I didn't enter the site at all, but just for absolute clarity, I was there. I was a volunteer on the outside. We were asked to assist with the removal of a number of young people from the entrance to that who were trying to gain access, just for the avoidance of doubt for any other members of the public that may have seen me in my role as a youth worker. I was in the vicinity of both of those concerts, but I will repeat, I certainly didn't go into that ground. I was there in that role and certainly didn't have the opportunity there to enjoy. Thanks.
Thank you. Washington will be 60 next year. Councillor Sean Laws and Councillor Price will answer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Washington, as a new town, will be 60 next year. Could the leader inform council as to what we might expect as part of the celebrations?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we all know that Washington has a long and proud history which Sunderland City Council is very keen to celebrate. Whilst the celebrations will be organised by Councillor Laws and his area chair and committee, alongside the area committee and steering group, I can commit to the meeting with the chair and officers that we will look at funding and wider support, whatever the City Council can provide, as part of its ongoing commitment to Washington and its residents. We're also aware that the Galleries Shopping Centre will be 50 that year, and a number of activities and local organisations were very keen to participate. So the Washington Area Committee are looking forward to arranging celebration for Washington 60. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Burn Park and Councillor Ward will ask the question and Councillor Rowntree will reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Free pest control, free bulky waste, free bins, long live Deng asks. This gives me great succour.
Point of order,
There has
Madam Mayor.
been an investment in restoring a water... I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, this is not the question put forward, is it?
Sorry?
I am sorry.
This is not the question put forward, Madam Mayor.
There has been an investment in restoring a water fountain in Burn Park.
Councillor Ward, will you please stick to the question? Thank you.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, absolutely. There has been an investment in restoring a water fountain in Burn Park, yet it does not serve water. Pipes were cleaned and tested in February, and again rechlorinated and retested in March, and still has not passed Northumbria water inspection. Why is the council not holding third-party contractors to account for services that residents pay for?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for Councillor Wood for the prior notice of the question rather than the introduction. The contractor was appointed to install the new water feature and pipework, but not to connect the mains water supply. This connection needs to be undertaken by a separate specialist contractor following completion of the satisfactory testing. A specialist contractor is currently progressing this testing and the connection, which should be resolved in the near future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Do I have a supplemental?
Councillor Ward.
When is near future? Is near future months or years
Councillor
or
Ward.
weeks? When is near future?
Madam Mayor, that's the best I can commit to at the minute. I will follow up with officers for a more specific date and ask that Councillor Wood is supplied with a more generalised time rather than something that's not as specific as the answer tonight. That's the best I can do for now, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowntree. Fixed speed cameras. Councillor Mullen will ask the question and Councillor Miller will reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the leader outline what representations the council has made to Northumbria Police in light of new evidence that none of the fixed speed cameras in the city work, and outline how the council will pursue the police until they deliver on their commitment to roll out new digital speed cameras?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Mullen for prior knowledge of the question. The responsibility for managing fixed-speed cameras rests with Northumbria Police. There are plans to replace fixed spot speed and red light cameras across the force area once the Northumbria Safer Roads Initiative partnership is re-established. This is being led by Gateshead Council on behalf of the 6 local authority areas that make up the Northumbria Police Force area. The Road Safety Team continues to work closely with officers from the Road Safety and Motor Patrol organisational departments within Northumbria Police to identify speed concern sites to help reduce the number of people killed or seriously injured in the roads within the Northumbria Police Authority area. But in closing, Councillor Mullen, I would say that if your government would only just give Northumbria Police more money, we'd have speed cameras that work.
Councillor Mullen.
Thank you. Could the leader tell us what representations he's made since he didn't the first time I asked?
I think you'll find I said that we do this through our road safety team and our road safety and motor patrol operational departments within the Northumbria Police. That's how the council deals with these things, Councillor Mullen. I personally do not get involved in phone calls regarding about where speed camera sites are going. Though, you know, if that would help, I'll give it a go.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Williams to move the Area Arrangements Annual Report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've great pleasure in presenting this Area Committee Annual Report. I'm proud of the work our area committees do to listen and deliver on behalf of their community.
Councillor Williams.
Oh.
Could I have a second to first, please?
Sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Right. Thank you.
Who seconds the report? Who seconds the report?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you. I need me tea. Right. Great pleasure in presenting this Area Committee Annual Report. Proud of the work our area committees do to listen and deliver for our communities. We couldn't deliver a lot of this without the support of the VCS network and our partners Gen 2, the police, fire and rescue and the ICB. I'm delighted particularly that we've established the VCS Alliance as a sector-led partnership to further develop the importance of working together. The Alliance is a recognised route for local commissioning and funding organisations who have confidence to fund activity via the Alliance. I'm also very proud of the warm spaces, which we have implemented in over 50 centres around the city. What can I say about the area committees, the area arrangement team? They are outstanding. They work tirelessly on behalf of our communities and support our area committees very effectively. I'd like to record my thanks to all the team. As I leave this portfolio, I was a little sad, but reading all those wonderful achievements and knowing I'll not have that oversight anymore. I was cheered up by the photo selected for the Washington report. That's a tiny little place next to the river, but it was where I lived for the first 18 months of my life. So it's quite a little sweetener for me leaving as part of that. So for me, it's out on a high, and good luck to Councillor Price and the whole team. I'll still be there as part of Washington Area Committee to have my voice, but I would absolutely commend this report to colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Price, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing further to add to the report. Thank you.
I understand that Councillor Sam Johnson and Councillor Mullen wish to speak on the report. Do any other members wish to speak on the report?
Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edgeworth. So, Madam Mayor, the speakers are Councillors Johnston, Mullen, Blackburn, Dixon, Edgeworth, and Councillor Williams has the right of reply.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I first thank Councillor Linda Williams, who I've shadowed for the last year. It's been good to shadow you because you've always been very fair with me, despite a rocky start, and you've always replied me promptly. So, thank you and good luck with your new role. But I've got to say, the Conservative group feel this report is equally as poorly written as last year's. The vast majority of it is just pictures and in big numbers. There's no real scrutiny of the work the area committees do, and for all the staff work hard, we need robust assessments of if this public money is actually delivering on the priorities, and really, it's not in there. So can I ask next year we can have a longer report that, actually doesn't just whitewash everything?
Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I begin by offering thanks to Gilly Stanley in the West area, who is in my top 3 favourite council officers. She helps make change in the Barnes ward more than I think anybody else. And Linda Williams was right to say that area committees are where our voices are best heard, and that's in no small part because of Gilly and other officers who support the committees. I would like to make a comment about the arrangements for the vice chairs of the East and West area. I note that both have been given by the leader to the Liberal Democrats this year. They have 15 councillors to our 13, and they've had a greater allocation than when we had 19 to their 12. I'm not bitter about it, that's fine. However, when in May 2021, I don't know if you'll remember this, but Phil Tye rang me to offer the East Area Vice Chair, and in turn, I rang Michael Dixon to offer that to him, but with a caveat. Because the Conservative group had proposed deleting 100% of the special responsibility allowance in our budget, I told Councillor Dixon he couldn't keep the money and had to give it away, which he did. So the situation now is that that money is no longer going to the community groups in the East area that Councillor Dixon gave it to. So through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask Councillor Edgeworth just to clarify, given that the Liberal Democrats also voted against it and have outlined their principles about people feeding from the trough, etc., will the East Area Vice Chair Special Responsibility Allowance continue to be put back into the community, or will it be spent on other things, such as, to choose a random example, train tickets to Liverpool?
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing me to speak to the Area Committee's annual report. Firstly, can I thank Councillor Linda Williams, our past portfolio, for her support, and welcome Councillor John Price into his new role as the portfolio holder within the area arrangements team. We also have 2 new area chairs, Councillor Joanne Laverick and Councillor Sean Laws, who I know bring added enthusiasm to their new roles. I would also like to pay tribute to 2 area chairs who have retired, and Councillor Len Loughlin. They both help steer their area committees to deliver great support to their residents. Madam Mayor, area committees, with the help of our VCS partners, do a fantastic job delivering support and help across the city.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems Anthony Mullen's still bitter about not being the majority opposition anymore. And Linda, I hope there's a blue plaque going up on that house on the riverside. The Liberal Democrat group welcomes this report. Can I just place our thanks to Martin Haswell for his excellent vice chairmanship of the West Area Committee in the last 12 months, and looking forward to Niall Hodson chairing the East Area Board and continuing to deliver for residents in that part of the city in this new role. And I think he's out in the East Area at the moment, getting to know some of the issues more well. Delighted to see progress across the city on a lot of the issues that matter to local people, and which Lib Dem councillors and colleagues from all parties have been pushing for, like extra enforcement officers, rangers, new parking schemes, highways projects, cameras, vehicle-activated signs, particularly welcome progress on the delivery of a better defibrillator network, which obviously Margaret Crosby has been campaigning for, but so have colleagues from all parties and all parts of the city. And I think it is really encouraging to see the area committee delivering on those type of issues, particularly where residents in the past have felt that the council hasn't listened or isn't listening. So we really welcome that the area committee allows colleagues to do that and kind of plug those gaps. And I think it is part of the council that actually commands respect, certainly from opposition members, that seems to work genuinely well across party lines. We just want to make sure that the new kind of system and review continues to enable councillors to fulfil that role, to deliver on local people's priorities, and there's not any pushback on that local autonomy for those committees. Thanks.
Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak?
Please. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Johnson, for your kind words. I do like to reply to people when they get in touch with me. Little disappointed with your comments about the area committee report being a whitewash. If you feel that that's becoming in that way, have your say as we get towards the end of the year and put in what you would propose to go through in that. I think it's a difficult balance to get to writing an absolute tome. People often quite like pictures and numbers because they're very visual. Depends which way you learn, I suppose, but we'll get that way. Councillor Mullen, you're absolutely right. The officers do make an impact. Gilly has worked really particularly hard managing 2 area committees. We've had Pauline doing a similar thing over Washington and Coalfields as well. We are now fortunate that we're fully staffed with all of those. Little intrigued about the Liverpool tickets. I'll have to ask you about that later. Bit sad that you brought budgets into full council, but never mind. Councillor Blackburn, thank you very much for your kind words. I do know that, again, with you sharing Pauline with us, that was very generous to be able to do that. And I do think we've managed it really well. Councillor Dixon, I do believe you've been a really good vice chair. Heard lots of nice things said about you. You have been a great support in that. So, thank you for your commitment to it there. Councillor Edgeworth, pleased to hear your support. That's really very positive. We do have new ways of working within area committees, and let's all make that work because that's the only way we can do it. So thank you, colleagues, for your very positive comments, and look forward to seeing area committees grow from strength to strength. Thank you.
Can we receive and note the area committee's annual report? I now call upon Councillor Mason Gage to move the annual scrutiny report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the scrutiny report. Seconded.
Councillor Dodds, do you second the report?
I second the report.
Can I remind members, please, when they speak to stand up, because I can't see you. Thank you. Councillor Mason Gage, would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report, which members have had a chance to read, sets out the work of the scrutiny committees during the last year. I would like to thank Councillor Diane Snowden and the other chairs for their contribution and the work they have undertaken in terms of developing the 4 committees, and the officers for their valuable support. Personally, I'm looking forward to my role in terms of continuing the improvement of the works to further development of scrutiny arrangements in Sunderland. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dodds, do you wish to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
I understand that Councillors Edgeworth and Councillor Mullen wish to speak on the report. Do any other members wish to speak? No. Councillor Edgeworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just place on record again our group's thanks to Diane Snowden, David Snowden, Michael Butler for their work chairing the committees last year, which was appreciated from all our colleagues who served on them. We're still think that the Labour group should open up more leadership positions in the scrutiny arrangements to members of the opposition, but I won't go over that old ground again. But it is going to be an issue of quality over quantity in terms of opposition vice chairs, with Paul Gibson stepping up to be vice chair of the Children's Committee. He's a wealth of experience in this area, and I know he'll be very diligent in scrutinising decision makers and making sure our city's young people have the opportunities they deserve. One thing that didn't make the report is that the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee did recommend last year that the Cabinet ditch the Council's propaganda magazine that's delivered at great taxpayer expense to households in the city. We continue to believe that this cannot be justified, and would urge the Cabinet to axe this entirely rather than just reduce it. Colleagues still want to see some improvements to the way data is presented to scrutiny committees, particularly more comparisons to help members assess how Sunderland matches up with other neighbours and other similar authorities. And there have been some ongoing issues. Obtaining data on recycling rates, which kind of makes it look like the council's avoiding publishing the figures that show that our recycling rates need to be drastically improved. So that would be an improvement for the coming year. The report does mention the visit to the Economic Prosperity Committee by Sunderland Culture, and this was the day before it was announced that the Glass Centre building was to be closed. We did ask for representatives of the university to come back to be questioned, but that request was denied, and I think we urgently need more transparency from the council and university on what went wrong with such a new building at the Glass Centre, how long it's been known about, and why every effort isn't being made to keep that as a standalone attraction for Sunderland. And I think through the number of signatories that came to the petition that Councillor Wood presented, we can see the strength of feeling from people across the city and the country on that. So we hope that the issue of the future of the Glass Centre and the impact of its closure on our cultural sector will be something that committee can explore in the coming year, and also looking forward to more appearances at scrutiny committees from cabinet members and deputy cabinet members as the new protocol gets rolled out. Thank you.
Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I offer again on behalf of my group our thanks to the fallen chairs of scrutiny who were doing a very good job, but sadly had the wrong politics to stay in place, which is quite perverse, really, given it's a scrutiny function. I'm not wrong, though. I was pleased this year to have chaired the task and finish group that led to the production of the Cabinet Scrutiny Protocol, and offer some thanks in relation to that to Gillian and Nigel, the scrutiny team, for the help in producing the final report, to Claire and Paul for coming along to our evidence session to hear what the committee had planned, and to Diane Snowden, Pat Smith, Paul Edgeworth and James Doyle for sitting on that task and finish group and attending the meetings that led to the final recommendation, which I understand the Cabinet has accepted in full without any amendments, and look forward to seeing them at scrutiny more over the coming year. On the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, which I find to be the most fulfilling committee within the Council, we have work to continue from last year relating to HR practices, workforce standards, the appropriateness of City Hall or otherwise as a workplace, and the underpinning assumptions relating to master planning and land disposal, which I look forward to feeding into tomorrow night's meeting with Councillor Hartnack. And as a final point, when in the 2021-22 year, the Council passed a motion to agree that there would be a scrutiny review, we agreed in that if that review recommended opposition-led scrutiny, that it would be implemented. During the session that we had following that report with the centre that led it, the reviewer said that he did believe that the Council would benefit from opposition-led scrutiny, and that he would submit a follow-up report to tag on to his main one, which advised of that. Can I ask, therefore, if that has been requested by the Council? If it has, when will it be acted upon? If it hasn't, can somebody write to him to ask for that supplementary report?
Councillor Mason-Gage, do you wish to exercise your right to reply?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can we receive and note the scrutiny annual report? Next is a report on action on petitions. Does any member wish to comment on the report?
Councillor Hartnack. Councillor Vera. And Councillor Mullen. So, Madam Mayor, the speakers are Councillor Hartnack, Vera and Mullen.
Councillor Hartnack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in relation to petition regarding Princess Avenue, and it's a compliment actually, often a battle getting things done sensibly with the council when, despite Princess Avenue being a main thoroughfare road, being worn through right to the cobbles beneath, the council were determined initially to install traffic calming measures onto a totally worn out road. It's nonsensical. Thankfully, following much representation by myself and former colleague Councillor Doyle, they eventually agreed to undertake the complete works for which residents are delighted. I understand Councillor Miller also had a hand to play in this, and for which, on behalf of residents in Princess Avenue, I am grateful. So thank you, Councillor Miller.
Councillor Vera.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank officers for their response to our petition in support of Coal Kitchen and for agreeing to send a copy of our petition to the Planning Inspectorate once the appeal process formally begins. In the interim, my ward colleagues and I will continue to support this beloved local business. Thank you.
Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mine isn't a compliment. I think having submitted my petition in January 2022, I might have expected a response a bit sooner than presently. Obviously, there's nothing that can be done now because the business in question has moved and the building has been demolished. So I'm not seeking to undo any of that, not that I could. But I would just note something going back to our previous motion on land deals at Seaburn, which I'll not go into because I know others had interests to declare. The council did make commitments to the Luciano's business, which, again, it subsequently didn't have that evidence trail to back up, relating to a relocation within the city centre. And when officers were questioned about this and questions were asked, the answer, as I mentioned earlier, was we can't account for ourselves. So that's 2 instances tonight relating to development where officers have just point blank said we haven't got the evidence to back up what we have done.
Can we accept the report? I now call upon the leader to move the approval and adoption of the report on the Local Government Boundary Commission for England Electoral Review of Sunderland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I so move.
Deputy Leader, do you wish to second the report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Leader, would you like to speak to the report?
Time is moving on, Madam Mayor, and we've still got 3 notices of motion to get through, so I'll just say the report is fully laid out and leave it there.
Deputy Leader?
Nothing further to add, Madam Mayor.
Does anyone wish to speak on the report? If so, please raise your hand. No. Do you accept the report on the Local Government Boundary Commission for England Electoral Review of Sunderland? Thank you. The next item tonight is report, which is a report of the Leader on special urgency decisions. Leader, would you please move?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm happy to report that there have been no such instances of special urgency decisions since the last report.
Deputy Leader, do you second the report?
Second the report, Madam Mayor.
Does Council agree to receive the report? We'll now deal with the notice of motion on the NHS. I invite Councillor Checker to read and move the motion.
Thank you Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This council notes that on the 5th of July 1948, an historic moment occurred in British history, a culmination of a bold and pioneering plan by the then Labour government to make healthcare no longer exclusive to those who could afford it, but make it accessible to everyone, and the NHS was born. However, the new Minister for Health, Aneurin Bevan, had to work hard to overcome opposition to the NHS, ranging from the BMA through to the Conservative Party, then led by Winston Churchill. In spite of all opposition, the National Health Service came into being as part of a series of reforms which aimed to use money from taxes to provide support from cradle to the grave. In terms of healthcare, the NHS brought many challenges to Britain's health system, many changes to Britain's health system. These included free medical treatment for all British citizens, the nationalisation of hospitals under the Ministry of Health and organised into regional health authorities, the creation of health centres to provide services like vaccinations, maternity care, district nurses, etc., a better distribution of doctors around the country with general practitioners, opticians and dentists in every area. This council therefore proposes to continue working with our colleagues in the NHS on how best to celebrate the 75 years that have brought great improvements to the health of our residents, inclusive of encouraging our schools and voluntary groups to actively participate in these celebrations, and to help put steps in place to arrange for as many buildings, historic monuments and other high-profile sites across the city to light up blue on the evening of the 5th of July. I move the motion, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Fiona Miller, would you like to second the motion?
I second the motion, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Checker, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I do. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The 5th of July 2023 marks 75 years of the National Health Service. The birth of the NHS was an historic moment in British history, the culmination of a bold and pioneering plan to make our healthcare no longer exclusive to those who could afford it, but make it accessible to everyone. Treating 1.3 million people a day in England, the NHS touches all of our lives, and today we cannot imagine life without it. Not every country has a system like ours, and the insecurity and the fear for those without it is huge. Niall Bevan, our Labour Health Secretary who created the NHS, put it best. He said, "Illness is neither an indulgence for which people have to pay, nor an offence for which they should be penalised." 75 years on, the NHS's founding principles remain intact as it continues to innovate and adapt to meet the needs of new generations, always putting patients at the heart of everything it does. But the NHS is facing a crisis. We have hundreds of preventable and avoidable deaths happening every week. There is a major staffing crisis with over 132,000 staffing vacancies and over 7 million people on waiting lists. We must not lose sight of the fact that we need to defend our NHS from those who seek to undermine its core values and campaign for its future for our generations. Madam Mayor, I wanted to briefly highlight the importance of political leadership in delivering healthcare and how political failure has led to the current crisis in the NHS and, of course, social care. Multi-year funding increases and a series of reforms actually resulted in major improvements in NHS performance between 2000 and 2010. But this declined from 2010, and I wonder what changed that year. As a result of those much lower funding increases, those limited funds for capital investment and a neglect in workforce planning, this continued for the rest of the decade. Long-term improvements in population health either stalled or went into reverse after 2010, and successive governments have been reluctant to use their powers to tackle the wider determinants of health, with cuts to the public health grant to local authorities, including ours, hindering the great work that happens locally to improve population health. The coalition government from 2010 to 2015 and successive governments, Conservative governments since then, have failed to heed the warnings and preferred to use short-term fixes rather than seeking long-term solutions. The improvements that occurred between 2000 and 2010 demonstrate that the NHS absolutely is capable of reform if the political will exists and if governments take a long-term perspective. Madam Mayor, what I'm trying to say here is the NHS will not survive 5 more years of a Tory government. It will, of course, be no surprise to people to hear that I support Labour's National Mission on Health to build an NHS fit for the future. After all, we've done it before, and when we get into government next year, we will do it again. If I may, I would like to take the opportunity to highlight People Not Profit, an exhibition which opens at Poprex on Monday next week to mark the NHS's 75th birthday. This show will feature a selection of emotive NHS worker portraits, and among the many images featured in this show is a haunting depiction of a nurse at the beginning of lockdown during the COVID pandemic. Madam Mayor, the actions in this motion are not contentious in any way, and I would hope everyone would support them. Personally, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the events to celebrate the NHS's 75th birthday, particularly with our schools and voluntary organisations. I'm aware there's a sand sculpture at Seaburn Beach and lots of other events across the city. And I'm really pleased to say that in Sunderland we are celebrating this milestone by lighting up all of our council-owned buildings and landmarks blue on the 5th of July, which I think will look amazing. So thank you to the Chief Executive for agreeing that, and I would like to encourage everyone to mark the day in some way. In conclusion, Madam Mayor, while we celebrate and thank the NHS for its 75 years service to us, let's not lose sight of the need to be vigilant and be prepared to take action to protect it for future generations. Today, I stand in solidarity with the junior doctors taking industrial action to stand up for their profession and fight back against 15 years of below-inflation pay rises. From the midwives who helped bring us into the world, the GPs and the pharmacists who are our first point of call when we are sick, the nurses, doctors and clinicians who care for us in our time of need, the porters and cleaners who keep our hospitals running, and the hundreds and thousands of dedicated staff and volunteers in between, people are the driving force in delivering this, and I would like them to be acknowledged and, of course, paid a wage worth their value. I know there are many current and former NHS staff and volunteers here in this chamber, and, of course, out in our communities across Sunderland. And, colleagues, I would like us to applaud them all. I propose the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Fiona Miller, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do. So, our NHS is about to become 75 years old. Oh my God, I'm not that old. I wish I was a lot older in a sense, because I think I've really benefited, should I say, from the NHS and for actually working for them at one point as well. But in this current climate of health inequalities, underfunding, understaffing, this is not the best 75th birthday they deserve. I have some interesting facts about the NHS, but I think, to be fair, Kelly's actually covered a couple of them already anyway. But the first heart transplant was in 1958, and the very first liver transplant was in 1968, 10 years later. So we continually deliver world-breaking operations, drugs and equipment for our patients. Sadly, the underfunding of the NHS has put the health and wellbeing hubs for our staff at risk. The hubs were set up by the NHS in England in 2021 in response to the trauma experienced by the NHS staff during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they provided a service to the NHS and social care staff with free and confidential local mental health services. Despite evidence of their value, government funding for the hubs has ended, leaving thousands of staff struggling with their mental health with no lifeline or support. As a member of the British Psychological Society, and with other organisations and public figures, we urge the government to commit to a minimum of 1 year's transitional funding to safeguard the vital support provided to the NHS and to the social care staff. There is a YouTube video by Stephen Fry that I can share with anyone wanted to actually keep the hubs and anyone who wants to get the message out, that the staff of the NHS and social care services should be given the support to protect their mental well-being. And if you want to have a look, it's #FundNHSHubs, and that's on YouTube. So once again, the underfunding, lack of thought, price of everything and value of nothing from this current government hits the people that we have tried to keep this country going. We clapped, and now we cannot give pay rises to staff. They have to seek help and food from food banks. Remove the free parking for staff. So the current government have made promises that the new and shiny pathway to excellence is the way forward. But to what? More cuts, more waiting lists, as the current staff are leaving in droves through exhaustion and the lack of support. I support the motion of notice, and I urge you all to support #Fund NHS Hubs campaign and this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Mullen, I understand that you have an amendment. Would you like to read it out, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To add to the end of the motion, a third bullet point which reads, Council agrees to celebrate the NHS's birthday by providing free car parking in council-owned car parks to all community nurses working within the city and by exploring ways to fund free staff parking for Sunderland Royal Hospital staff at that site.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
I understand that Councillor Gibson and Councillor Williams wish... Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Mullen.
I don't take it personally. I'll keep this brief in the interest of time because this has got two elements to it. The first is to say that I think there are other things that the council can do, and this comes from an issue that Councillor Eyre has raised in relation to a longer lasting legacy for marking this birthday. And the second comes from a concern from our residents. And given that the two dovetail, it seems to me that this is an opportunity to bring them together. The first thing to say is that Councillor Eyre has dealt with members of community nursing teams that he has worked with 30 years ago, and they are still struggling to park in the same places in the city that they couldn't get parked 30 years ago, namely some of the tower blocks in the city centre and some of the properties around the outskirts of the city centre. So the council can help in that respect by simply allowing them to park as we park in council-owned car parks, or that particular one, for free. They wouldn't be there for particularly long, but it would help because the current situation is that they have to pass permit from nurse to nurse. So rather than put them in a situation where they're handing permits around themselves and having to meet up and then find a car parking space, why not allow them use of the city centre's car parks for free? They would be there briefly and it wouldn't cost the council very much to do that. They could be added to the number plate recognition system that we are added to. It would be straightforward and simple. The second element is to deal with the issues in relation to the Royal Hospital site. And this is where I say that this proposal dovetails with residents' concerns as well. I think the Pallion and Millfield councillors will back me up in saying that we've had to put in an ever-increasing community parking management scheme in order to handle the sheer number of cars who are parking residential streets rather than on the hospital site because of charges. Many of those, it has to be said, are patients and they wouldn't be covered by this, so it wouldn't eliminate the problem entirely. And we've worded it in quite a loose manner. We're not committing any money, only asking that it be looked at. But if you could consider what can be done, it would both alleviate that problem that residents face, that their streets are congested and that the CPMS has now actually reached the Broadway roundabout. It can't go any further, but the parking problem has followed it to its natural conclusion. So it's only been semi-effective. But it would also be a longer lasting legacy as part of this motion in relation to the birthday celebrations. Turning the lights on is fine, but this would be, I think, a much stronger commitment from the council.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I think it's important that we do celebrate the NHS as a health service. It provides world-class treatment to patients and has done now for decades, but also the quality of people working within our NHS, which is what our amendment seeks to reflect. I'm the son of an NHS worker, not a community nurse, but I know we have incredible people working all across our health service to make sure that people in the city and in the region are looked after. And for that reason, I support celebrating this key anniversary in the way outlined in the original motion. However, as a historian, it would be remiss for me not to talk about the infancy of the NHS, which is what this motion gets, quite frankly, terribly wrong. So, first of all, the attack on Churchill is actually quite absurd and worrying. You know, this is the man who defeated fascism and has kept us as a free country, but obviously that's not important to Labour. So, let's look also, though, in the specific context of the formation of the NHS. Now, like Councillor Stewart, I have a manifesto, but this is much better than his little red book. So let's look at the 1945 Conservative General Election Manifesto and what it says. It says the health services of this country will be made available to all citizens. Everyone will contribute the cost, and no one will be denied the attention, the treatment, or the appliances he requires because he cannot afford them. We propose to create a comprehensive health service covering the whole range of medical treatment from the general practitioner to the specialist, and from the hospital to convalescence and rehabilitation, and to introduce legislation for this purpose in the new Parliament. The success of this service will depend on the skill initiative of doctors, dentists, nurses, and other professional people. Now, I'll not quote the rest of the manifesto because we've reached the important point. Indeed, the initial opposition to the NHS did not come from the Conservative Party, but from Labour, who drove Bevan to the point of resignation over the introduction of prescription charges for dentistry and glasses. Bevan said, after all, the National Health Service was something of which we were all very proud, and even the opposition were beginning to be proud of it. If only it had to last a few more years to become part of our traditions, and then the traditionalists would have claimed the credit for all of it. Why should we throw it away? In the Chancellor's speech, there was not one word of commendation for the health service, not one word, what is responsible for that? Why has the cut been made? He cannot say with an overall surplus of over 220 million, and a conventional surplus of 39 million, that he had to take the 13 million from the NHS. This is the arithmetic of Bedlam. So why did Labour do it? I wonder if any of the Labour councillors can reconcile what Bevan actually said with the quite revisionist history presented in their motion, or indeed, since the Lib Dems are remarkably quiet in this, what Nick Clegg said when he pointed out that Andy Burnham, the Labour Health Secretary from about 2007 to 2010, in this so-called golden age of health, is the only politician ever to have privatised a hospital in this country. So, with that, I'll wait for Labour's answers to, quite frankly, the work of fiction they've put forward, but I'll not hold my breath.
I understand the Councillors Gibson and Williams wish to speak on the motion. Do you wish to speak on the amendment?
Speak on the main motion, Madam Mayor. Not the amendment, no.
Councillor Williams? Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment?
Councillor Diane Snowden. So, Madam Mayor, the speakers on the amendment are Councillors Williams, Diane Snowden, Butler, Donaghy and Eyre, and Councillor Checker has a right of reply.
Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure to speak on this motion. We are very, very fortunate in this country to have a National Health Service. It was interesting when I was looking, the first baby born was a little girl called Anira, 1 minute past midnight. I've always liked that name. I didn't actually realise the first child was called that. When you look back to before the establishment of the NHS, it was 1 and 6pence for a birth, which with the wages at that time have been anywhere between £4 and £5 a week, would be enough to buy bread and margarine for a whole family for that week. That must be horrendous when you're thinking, do I feed my family whilst I've got to pay for the birth of my baby? I'm so happy that we're not in that situation now, particularly when you look at what happens. The NHS has developed over the years, but I do think we've moved on from some of the established principles. We've let things in like CCT, compulsive competitor tendering, which was an issue. We've got commissioning of virtually everything, and that actually takes away money from frontline services. We're fortunate we don't have to particularly think if you're involved in a really nasty accident or you've got an illness that needs support with, like in other countries. I've got a grandson with Crohn's. He's on 4 weekly infusions. A few years ago, the substance he was getting wasn't working. And the hospital can't just say, we'll move you on to the next one. You have to go and have it checked. He had to go to Kensington in Chelsea to have a discussion and be examined there. That was really quite scary for us, thinking, is he going to get something that's going to be able to make him function for the rest of his life? Because he'll be on infusions for the rest of his life. Luckily, it's worked, but he's on an adult medication at the moment, which meets his needs, but he's 14. So, you know, that's really good that we've got that, but quite nerve-wracking to think that there could be a commissioning body turn him down for that reason. If I think about the US, a place I love visiting, there's very much 2-3-tier system in place. If you can afford the insurance, you have top of the range, you go into your doctor and say, this is what I want for my treatment, and that's generally managed. If you're in the mid-bit, you're generally limited as to what you can have. That can cause problems, particularly if you've got a serious illness. If you've got no insurance, your chances are just horrendous. If you're involved in an accident, you're taken to a hospital which may have limited staffing, limited expertise around that, limited equipment. Your chances of survival aren't as good as they would be if you are well and truly insured. We do need a long-term strategy, we need a stable plan, we need a finance plan around how we can manage to keep this wonderful service going for all of us, to ensure that we can all live long and successful lives. Absolutely appreciate what you've put forward there, Councillor Mullen. Oh, he's gone. You know, we do need some recognition with the staff who work long and hard hours and are well committed to us as a nation. So I support both the original and the amendment, whichever we go for. Thank you.
Councillor Diane Snowden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to keep this brief, Madam Mayor. As someone who first started working for our beloved NHS at the age of 18 in 1982 at the old Sunderland Royal Infirmary, and who returned to the NHS in 2021 as a COVID vaccinator, I've worked with colleagues and volunteers from every area of our NHS. Madam Mayor, I rise to support the original motion and this amendment, and would like to thank all of our NHS staff, past and present, for everything they've done for us and our country over the last 75 years. As somebody who would normally ask for the area to be lit up red for Labour, on this occasion I'm happy to see our city lit up blue. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support the original motion and the amendment. I think it's a decent amendment and something we, as a Labour group, should support. As an employee of the NHS, I was trained there. I've developed into my whole persona from the NHS, and I commit fully to that role, as many colleagues in this chamber are currently serving in the NHS, as well as those that have retired. Forgive me, Councillor Diane Snowden, when she started in the NHS, I wasn't born. My apologies. And I know there's other colleagues, such as Councillor Checker, who's also serving in the NHS. And of course, those colleagues as well across the floor, Councillor Bond and Councillor Eyre. Forgive me if I've forgot anyone.
Personally, I've benefited from the NHS. I've had 2 eye surgeries, of which I was very young, at our fabulous eye infirmary, which of course is soon to be here, very close by. Again, speaking to the actual amendment, I think parking is something that is in everyone's mind, certainly at the forefront, especially with parking at hospitals and things like that. We have little control over that, but this is something we can have influence and control over. And working in the community myself, a lot of the time, although I do work in quite rural areas, parking's less of an issue. I can't imagine working in a busy city centre like Sunderland, because of course we're getting even busier. We're a thriving city centre. Regeneration is absolutely fantastic, but that doesn't come without the negative points, which is obviously parking, that we as a Labour group are trying to do something about. And I believe this is something we can do something about, is to give free parking to not just community nurses, but all community staff, if possible. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The NHS is possibly the most loved healthcare system in the world. Being free at the point of delivery is at its core, and that almost should always remain the case. We must not be afraid to talk about the future of the NHS. Reform and restructuring are essential to ensure the best possible service for patients and to ensure a safe working environment for the amazing and dedicated staff to ensure we still have a free health service in 75 years' time. As some of you know, my wife is a nurse. She's a sister at Sunderland Royal Hospital. I'm incredibly proud of her and everyone who she works with. I'd like to pass my thanks to not just Sunderland Royal Hospital, but all the NHS staff out there. I've been in the NHS as a patient on several occasions quite recently. The work they do, the dedication to the patients is second to none. So I'd like to say thank you to the NHS, and here's to 75 more years. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Mullen for mentioning the parking issues for nurses in the town centre and explain 30 years just to make me feel older than I actually am. So thanks for that. I just wanted to raise a couple of issues on what Councillor Mullen actually mentioned. The key fobs that he mentioned that give community nurses access to the parking in the tower blocks, they would have more, but these fobs are £1,200 each. That's what the council charges the NHS. Now, I'm no IT guy, but I think the modern world, a little bit of plastic with a chip in, shouldn't cost £1,200. However many fobs are needed for the nurses, I think we should be giving them that. So free parking and free access is important. I'll give you one quick scenario of what it's like when you're trying to reach a patient in the town centre in the tower blocks. You want to get in, you need a fob, you don't have one, so you end up phoning a colleague to meet them up somewhere else to get the fob so you can go and visit the patient. Now, patients have different needs. There can be a simple thing like an insulin injection, a routine, but the ones that really stand out are those, for instance, who are terminally ill. Now, those are families by the bedside who people are dying, and they need a nurse quick. They need them there with the equipment and all that's needed. So they need to be parked very close to the residents. So free access and free parking across the board is absolutely vital. Now, if our no nurses, the other thing we could give them as a birthday present, 50% off in brew and bake. If you give them a coffee in the hand and a cake, you'll make a nurse very, very happy. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Checker, you have the right to reply.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Councillor Mullen, thank you for bringing the amendment. Clearly, it's something that's got good support across the chamber. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that you're too late. We've already started doing this, and our city transport team have already started this. If you'd come and asked me, I could have told you that already. Great amendment, something we do completely support. So thank you for bringing it. You used a lot of words, and it was all very interesting. And thank you. Unfortunately, the second part of the motion in relation to parking at Sunderland Royal, You'll be aware the trust is that's an entirely separate entity. It's not something we've got control of. It's something that is mandated nationally. It's something that I'll make sure that Keir is aware of when he becomes Prime Minister next year, and I'm sure it'll be top of the list. I'll do that for you, Councillor Mullen. I'll pass on your message. Councillor Johnston, again, thanks for the history lesson. Apologies, I heard a lot of hot air. I think you missed the point. This was a speech about the NHS, not about fascism, and that's why fascism wasn't mentioned. But it was very kind of you to bring the tone down. Thank you so much to my colleagues for their support. I'm aware that the NHS is a much-loved organisation from everybody, and I know it gets cross-party support, which is great. It's pleasing to hear from current and former NHS staff and also husbands and wives. I know how important the job is that everybody does. Councillor Eyre, you clearly know nurses. I am a nurse, I'm a community nurse as well, not in this city. Nurses live for coffee and cake, so clearly you are somebody that knows a few nurses. Madam Mayor, just thank you very much to everyone for their contributions today. It's pleasing to see that the amendment is a positive one, and I'm very happy that we'll be supporting it in the Labour group to enhance what was already a positive motion, and we'll look forward to the 75th birthday celebrations for the NHS. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can we vote on the amendment? Would it be all right if I don't read the whole thing out again and you can read it from the screens? Thank you. Does any member wish to comment further on the new substantive motive? I believe Councillor Gibson, Councillor Miller.
So that's Councillor Gibson, Leader, Councillor Roundtree, Councillor Blackburn. So, Madam Mayor, the speakers are Councillors Gibson, Graham Miller, Councillor Roundtree and Councillor Blackburn.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll begin by saying that the Liberal Democrat group agreed unanimously to support the motion. The NHS is far more than a national institution. It's transformed and saved millions of lives in the last 75 years. On a personal note, with my usual impeccably bad sense of timing, I was born 19 weeks before the NHS was founded, and as a result, I cost my parents almost £250 in medical bills, and that was for a home birth. If it had been a hospital birth, my father, being a working man, couldn't have afforded it. I can also remember the rolling out of vaccination programmes in the 50s for polio and TB, and I can remember a couple of my classmates having leg irons as they'd been polio victims, something you just don't see today. So, based on that, I'm all for the NHS. It's fitting that we pay tribute to Aneurin Bevan, who did sterling work in putting through the NHS bill. Without taking anything away from him and his team, we should also remember that great Liberal, William Beveridge, the father of the Beveridge Report. He had already played a big part in introducing labour exchanges and national insurance before the First World War. His work attracted the attention of Sidney and Beatrice Webb in the Fabian Society, and he worked closely with them, and they made him director of the London School of Economics, where he wrote 6 books on the subject of poverty and welfare reform. In the wartime coalition in 1941, a Labour minister, Arthur Greenwood, appointed him to chair a committee to look at social insurance services to help the old, sick, poor and generally derelict, and to make recommendations. The outcome was the Beveridge Report 1942, which identified 5 giants: idleness, ignorance, disease, squalor and want, and called for a free NHS free at the point of use, to be financed by the state, with contributions from employers and workers. It has published a universal acclaim, The Times, a momentous document, The Guardian, a big and fine thing, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Christianity in Action. At the time, when it was published, my father told me, who was a frontline soldier, told me that copies of the report were delivered to them along with the ammunition, and it was absolutely devoured by the men who thought it was fantastic and really boosted morale. The Labour government, 1945 to 51, adopted the proposals and implemented them in full. Sadly, Winston Churchill, at the time of the Beveridge report, was not very happy with it and warned against it on the grounds that it would impose great and new expenditure on the state without any relation to the circumstances which may prevail at the time. Now, despite what the Conservative manifesto said in 1945, when it was actually voted on, Sir Winston and the party voted against the introduction of the NHS. That is historical fact. That debate, that tension, continues to this day. And what happened, and it's as alive today as ever. I'd like to say that I and my ward colleague, Councillor Curtis, are proud to announce that when the ambulance men were on strike, we appeared on their picket line on 3 occasions as defenders of the NHS. Long may it survive and prosper. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Leader.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do welcome the amendment regarding what we're doing for community nurses, and as Councillor Checker has already pointed out, this was something the Council was engaged with through officers and has been for quite some time. So a small plea as part of what I'm going to say is that, as Councillor Checker once again said, if you'd only talk to us about some of these things, we could give you answers which would give us better notices of motion and a better debate about things, rather than rehashing ground that we're already partially covering. Having the 75th birthday of the NHS, I don't think people understand the gravitas of that, just how important it is that we have it, because without it, the likelihood is that 20% of us wouldn't be here because we'd be dead. You know, deaths in birth for mothers and children, and then the illnesses that followed in the first 5 years. And the NHS swept all of that away. And yes, of course, we still have deaths in the system, which are terrible for the people that are involved in that. But to have a population that all of a sudden had access to the care they needed when they needed it, without them worrying about how they would pay for it, was a transformative moment in the 20th century for the people of the United Kingdom. The greatest Prime Minister and the greatest government of the 20th century was Clement Attlee's government after the Second World War, taking over from Winston Churchill as a war leader. Cannot say anything about that. But he had no idea about what the British people had been fighting for. And that Second World War had made men and women realise they wanted more. They wanted better housing, they wanted better transport, they wanted better schools for their children, and they wanted healthcare. And the Labour Party delivered it all to them in 1948, and we had the massive upswing in house building, building roads, building those schools, but more importantly, putting the infrastructure in place and delivering the hospitals, the GPs, and all the staff that support the NHS to make us a healthier, wealthier population. But the problem has always been that the Conservative Party have never liked the NHS, didn't want the NHS. I much prefer Councillor Gibson's comments on the history of that discussion rather than Councillor Johnson's, who I'm sure is taking it out of a Janet and John book that were also published in the 60s as part of the education process. And I know you're too young for them, Sam, but honestly, we've always supported the need of this for our population, because if you have a healthy population, people deliver. And we're currently in a situation now that whilst this council's going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the NHS and we're going to light everything up in blue, Anthony will be particularly happy with that. But it's a very serious position to be in, where we constantly strive to work out how to get the NHS working better. And it's not always money. It is about sometimes how you do things. And for me, it's about ultimately, I think we're getting very, very close to that crux, which is that we must put prevention ahead of cure. We must take the cost out of hospitals. We must make sure we spend money in the community from birth to keep people healthy at that point with their families, and making the parents understand that you must get your children to a dentist, you must eat well, because down the line all of these chronic conditions come along and they cost the NHS billions. Now we're almost at that nodding point now. I think there's politically consensus coming around from a whole raft of areas where that conversation needs to be a bit more grown up. The bottom line is, however, regardless of what model we end up with, it will still, under Labour, remain free at the point of need. And it always will. And that we're constantly looking to ensure that the NHS staff are paid appropriately, feel appreciated, and that we've got that conduit for staff coming forward, which we currently don't have, because we've cut the wages of doctors for 15 years, and we've cut the wages for nurses and all the other staff that work in hospitals, so that nobody wants to come and work in the NHS now. I'm not even going to mention the Brexit word. We lost tens of thousands of staff.
Leader.
Just there. Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. However, in closing, thank you, Madam Mayor, I think we can all agree that this organisation, as Councillor Donaghy said, is the jewel in the crown, and we must support it and all its staff, and I'm sure everybody will vote this notice of motion through fully supported. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Rowntree.
Given the time, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move to the vote.
Yep.
Is that Councillor Checker?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one point that I'd like to make before we close. Again, thanking my colleagues, but I'd like to remind people, both in the chamber and hopefully people out there in the public, of what they can do to help celebrate the NHS. So some examples that I've got are to join the NHS team, to volunteer at your local NHS organisation, to give blood, to join the NHS organ donor register, to support NHS charities, or join the NHS 1,000 Miles Challenge to raise funds for our NHS. And that's all I would like to say, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much.
Is the substantive motion agreed? Thank you. We've now come to 7 o'clock, and since we've debated that, can we close this meeting now? That concludes the meeting.